It's 8 o'clock in Israel and Gaza as Benjamin Netanyahu swears in his new war cabinet. The United Nations says Gaza is facing a dire situation as the combined death toll since Saturday's attacks reaches 2,700. Good morning, 6 o'clock here in the UK on Friday, the 13th of October. Today,
Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, dropping 6,000 bombs on Hamas targets over the past 6 days, killing over 1,400 people. Human Rights Watch accuses Israel of using the controversial munition white phosphorus, but the IDF says that it is currently not aware of that use.
the Israeli Prime Minister warns of difficult days ahead as he swears in a new war cabinet. The country's top general admits the military has failed to protect its citizens. Our reporter Charlie Peters is in Tel Aviv.
Millions on the move as Israel warns citizens of North Gaza to head south.
Well, with the Ukraine war still raging on and now fresh chaos in the Middle East, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps will be having serious decisions to make, and we'll be talking to him later this hour.
Well, the Prime Minister's in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation, but it's overshadowed by the conflict elsewhere, with the news that British ships and planes will be sent to the eastern Mediterranean.
And of course, Alex, we'll have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. It's going to turn colder for this weekend, but before then, we have a wet and windy day today. I'll have more in a second.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this, of course, is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, let's kick straight off with the main news this morning. And in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip should relocate to the southern half in the next 24 hours.
The UN says this would mean over 1 million people having to flee, saying that it is impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
Well, as the latest escalation of this decades-long conflict now enters its seventh day, the death toll on the Israeli side has risen to 1,300. The number killed in Gaza, 1,400. The UN says food and water are running out fast in Gaza, and 50,000 pregnant women are now unable to access essential services.
As Israel reels from the human devastation inflicted on it by Hamas terrorists and its allies rally around it in a show of support, Israeli ground forces gather around Gaza as a likely ground invasion looms. The World Trade Organization is warning that if the conflict spreads to the region, it could have a hugely negative impact on already weak global trade flows.
There's uncertainty about whether this is going to spread further to the whole region, which could impact very much on global economic growth. There's uncertainty as to when it will end. It is most unfortunate.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Morning to you, Charlie. What do we know then about this claim that Israel wants people in the northern Gaza Strip to move south? Because it doesn't really sound feasible.
I've lost comms.
Oh, I don't think he can hear us.
He's lost us. No, I mean, look, clearly this is a warning against what could be about to happen on the Israeli side in terms of either further munitions or moving the ground force in. But the Gaza Strip has got 2 million people in it, and it is packed.
It is packed. Yeah, there's no room for moving people at all, is there?
No.
There's nowhere for them to go, really.
I mean, so it is a warning that's been given, but quite how you do shift innocent civilians down, it just seems pretty impossible. Let's talk to Israeli journalists as we try and reconnect with Charlie. We'll talk to Israeli journalist Amir Oren, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Look,
good morning, Stephen and Anne.
Good morning.
What's your assessment of what we're likely to see in the next 24 hours?
So what preceded this announcement by the Israeli authorities that the Palestinians in the northern part of Gaza had better move south was that many thousands of Israelis have had to move out of their homes in the western Negev region, either because they were the victims of the horrific atrocities perpetrated against them, or that they were the neighbors who feared a repeat of this massacre. So the first relocation in the war zone happened in Israel already. Now, Israel is facing a very tough dilemma. It doesn't want to kill and devastate the Gaza Strip, the infrastructure, the innocent population, but it does want to uproot the Hamas operatives and ammunition, rockets, and the like, which they hide among the population. So for the time being, what it is directing the population to do is to move from the northern part to the central and southern regions of the Strip. The entire Strip is only some 60 kilometers on 7-8 kilometers. It's very dense, it's an enclave. And then probably what Israel would like to do is to move the population in the opposite direction, from the south to the north. Now, this is really impossible. It will cause a great damage and suffering to many people, and a diplomatic solution had better been found.
And how do you see that solution coming forward? I mean, what possibly can happen next that doesn't involve death and destruction?
So what I'm about to suggest, as far as I know, has not been discussed between the Americans and the Israelis and others. However, Secretary of State Blinken is going to Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So maybe they are going to speak about a formula similar to what happened in the summer of 1982 in Lebanon, where Israel laid siege to Beirut and Yasser Arafat was forced to lay down the PLO's arms and move out of Beirut, first to Tripoli in northern Lebanon and then to Tunis. If one can convince Qatar or Turkey to take the leadership of Hamas and whoever wants to go on exile and stop terrorism, then maybe the population can be spared. But in order for that to happen, someone must first broach the idea, and who knows, maybe the UK can be the first to come up with it.
I mean, it's a never-ending cycle of violence. I mean, this is the problem with this, as we've discussed for decades. Because, look, there's no question this attack by Hamas, this devastating and cruel attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians has triggered what we're seeing now. Is there a possibility that the people of the Gaza Strip will turn against Hamas because of the suffering which has been rained down upon them?
No, it's impossible, improbable. The Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have some 30 to 40,000 men under arms. They rule Gaza with an iron hand, iron fist. There is no possibility of that. And not only that, the Palestinian Authority, which rules parts of the West Bank, would not come even after a regime change in Gaza to rule on Israeli bayonets. And an international peacekeeping force would not come either, because they will become the victims of terrorism. So it's a very, very difficult situation. But the fact is that the national movements of Israelis and Palestinians can find some compromise. The religious movements, such as Shiite Hezbollah or Sunni Hamas, do not agree to any compromise at all. They do not even recognize Israel within the 1949 borders. So with them, it's a war to the end, with some respite between rounds.
It seems such an impossible situation I don't think any of us can quite grasp where it's all going to end. I mean, it's just going to be terrible for days and days, weeks maybe. What do you see happening?
Well, the biggest mistake was trying to rule Gaza and the West Bank, the biggest Israeli mistake, without the help of Egypt in Gaza or Jordan in the West Bank. So Israel is now left to its own devices. And what is making it even more difficult is the settlement activity in the West Bank. And the settlers, who are only 5% or so of the Israeli population, have a stranglehold on the Israeli government because their political representation is so important to Benjamin Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, who is standing trial for corruption, does not want to resign. So most of the Israelis resent this state of affairs, but short of early elections, they are powerless to change the situation.
OK, Amir, we've got to leave it there. It's good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Let's see if we can reconnect with Charlie Peters, who's also in Tel Aviv. Charlie, what is the latest situation on the ground?
Well, that order coming in from the IDF, its liaison officers speaking to the UN for millions in the north of Gaza to head south past the Wadi Gaza, a wetland area kind of halfway down the Gaza Strip. South of it, there are more built-up areas, but there's also lots of farmland, lots of open-air spaces. In the north, of course, people are in shelter, where bombardments have been happening relentlessly over the last 5 or 6 nights. Last night, the IDF said it hit over 750 targets in the Gaza Strip, targeting more of what it says are Hamas military capabilities. And this order to move in the next 24 hours, as you've heard, the UN has called on Israel to rescind it, saying it will generate an even worse humanitarian situation than the one that is already declining very rapidly in the Gaza Strip. People are sheltering in hospitals that are running out of fuel, as generators require fuel to turn on the power amid this electricity and water blockade imposed by Israel. And also people unable to move. There are just 2 main supply routes in the Gaza Strip, one close to the coast, one further inland. To move 1.1 million people south in just 24 hours is a logistical feat of huge proportions in normal times. In times of war, it's potentially impossible. So why are they doing this? Why is the IDF and its liaison officers calling on the UN to enact that evacuation order north of Gaza? Well, it's likely that they want to ramp up their already very strong bombing campaign in the area to soften those targets and shape the ground for what is almost certain now, the next stage as they prepare for that likely ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, the first since 2014. Israel says it has to follow its mission to destroy Hamas and its military capabilities. Yesterday, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, the IDF Chief of Staff, said that Hamas was doomed, and as they prepare for more air attacks and a ground invasion, it seems that they're extremely keen on following through on that mission.
Charlie, it seems so strange talking to you as we are doing now. There's a blue sky behind you, beautiful sunshine. It's extraordinary to think that you are actually in a war zone. What's it been like overnight? What is it like at the moment during the night?
Well, usually at home I'd sleep with AirPods in, but here I can't because we're listening out for air sirens every night. People are regularly taking shelter in central Israel due to rocket attacks from the Gaza Strip. Ashkelon and Ashdod, cities further south of us, have been receiving rocket barrages very regularly since Saturday, where Hamas fired 4,500 rockets in one day. They're now, the IDF says, reducing their rocket attacks to around 200 to 400 a day as they prepare for a long-term conflict. Sustaining that level of rocket attack is extremely difficult, especially when they are an asymmetric militant group without direct state support on the ground. Of course, the Gaza Strip is an impoverished area, but a lot of money in the area does go towards missiles being fired into Israel. In Tel Aviv is a relatively safe place in comparison to the rest of the country. But people coming back here are sheltering from the atrocities in the south. And we're also seeing lots of wounded IDF soldiers returning here, seeking the support and the shelter of their homes. 2 nights ago, we saw an IDF soldier, just 19 years old, walking through the streets at night. He had 2 slings on, one sling on his arm, which was injured, and another sling carrying an M16 rifle. He was walking home just to see some friends quickly before getting some more rest and recuperating after what he had seen and endured on the front lines. But yes, a very tense atmosphere here as people anticipate that likely ground invasion and prepare also, let's not forget, for the threats coming from the north. In southern Lebanon, Lebanese Hezbollah have been firing missiles and guided missiles into northern Israel, and there's also been an increased threat from Syria, shelling from Syria in the last couple of days, which the Israeli Air Force responded to by launching airstrikes on the international airports in Aleppo and Damascus. So several fronts opening in this extremely complex battle space, and we likely expect now the next phase with that ground invasion into the Gaza Strip.
OK, Charlie, for now, thanks very much indeed. It is 6:16. Let's just remind you of the main news today. And in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the UN that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip should relocate to the south in the next 24 hours. The UN says it's impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
And with the Ukraine war still raging on and now fresh chaos in the Middle East, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps will be having serious decisions to make, and we'll be talking to him later this hour.
And the Prime Minister's in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation, but of course it's overshadowed by what is happening elsewhere.
It's almost impossible to think, isn't it, what politicians can do? What can they decide that they wouldn't have already decided?
If there was an easy,
could actually get anything done.
Well, if there was an easy answer, it would have happened decades ago.
Well, exactly, yeah. Well, this is just terrible, isn't it?
You just have to observe what is going on and come to your own conclusions. But, you know, when it's innocents being killed on both sides,
on both sides,
actually.
Human beings on both sides.
But then, you know, what do you expect Israel to do if it is attacked like that? It's not going to sit back. We didn't sit back. America didn't sit back. You know, you take action, don't you? But it's horrific on all sides. So all this going through the mind of world leaders, of course, at the moment. And the Prime Minister is joining Northern European leaders in a summit in Sweden today, where they are going to talk about the conflict in Israel and Gaza.
Of course, the meeting of the UK-led defence grouping had been expected to see leaders focus on the threat from Russia, as the war in Ukraine, of course, heads into another winter.
But the attack by Hamas over the weekend has pushed the region to the very top of the agenda.
And of course, this comes as the Prime Minister has already confirmed that the UK will send Royal Navy vessels and a surveillance aircraft to the Eastern Mediterranean to help support Israel.
And the key part of that is to try to stop, apparently it's surveillance to try to stop any weapons getting into Gaza for Hamas to use, which is the concern about the humanitarian corridors, which of course the UN wants to see opened up. Is it illegal not to open them up? The people are suffering. The argument is they are used, have been used and would continue to be used to get weapons and munitions through to Hamas, which is a genuine concern.
It is. I know it must be awful for anybody watching at the moment. You switch on the telly in the morning and it's just bad news at the moment. It's very, very difficult to take. It's very difficult to be part of it as well, even reading it out to you. But, and you scratch your head and you think, how can we come to this? You know, war, 2 big wars going on at the moment.
It is thoroughly depressing. And as you look at these live pictures from Gaza this morning, and you can see that, I mean, look, Gaza's always been a mess, frankly, but with this extra devastation that has been hit. And if you look at social media at the moment, of course, it's all people saying, well, we've got dead Israeli babies, which seems to be the case, and dead Palestinian babies, which certainly seems to be the case as well. And it's how you're meant to distinguish what is more tragic than the other.
How do you keep yourself together when the news is this bad? What do you think of that actually makes you think, oh, at least there is some good in the world? I don't know. Is that robin that I showed you earlier?
Yeah.
I was showing Stephen a picture of... I've got a robin in my garden who's absolutely feisty little chap and sings like you... absolutely gorgeous. And I found myself just staring at him and thinking, how brilliant. There are some wonderful things in the world too. What keeps you up, I suppose? What...
Yeah, we have to be very thankful that we're not caught in the midst of something like this, don't we?
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, do get in touch with us. Tell us, what makes you count your blessings sometimes. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Alex.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather update on this wet and windy Friday. We do have some colder weather to come this weekend, but for the time being, it's a wet and windy picture across the bulk of the UK. Heavy rain across many parts of England and Wales. The highest rainfall totals likely to be building up over the Welsh mountains, but for many, it's a wet picture. And in the south, we could see some heavy thundery downpours developing as we go through the afternoon. Brighter further north, but blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A chilly feel here, milder towards the south with highs of around 21 or 22 Celsius. Some further heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across the south-southeast, but that rain does clear away as we go through the night. And then we have quite a few places seeing clear skies overnight. Some showers, though, piling down on a cold northerly wind, so particularly around Irish Sea coastal areas and towards the north of Scotland. But with clear skies, many places are going to wake up on Saturday morning to a chilly start. A touch of frost, especially in the north, but then it should be a mostly bright morning. We are going to see showers continuing to pile down on that northerly wind, and they are going to become more widespread as we go into the afternoon. Across Scotland, some of those showers could be wintry over the higher ground, so some sleet or snow possible here. And it's going to be a cold day. Temperatures markedly down compared to where they were last weekend, getting to highs of just 14 or 15 Celsius.
There you go. There you go. Look, coming up, we're going to be going over Scotland's defeat by Spain in the Euros with Paul Coyte. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 6:24. Morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Right, it's sport time, I think, isn't it?
No.
Is it not?
Not quite.
No. Headlines
not
first?
Not quite. Yes, we'll have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom. Don't you know, Anne? Don't you know?
Absolutely. Firefighters in Scotland are to be consulted on strike action over a devastating package of cuts. That's according to the Fire Brigades Union. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service announced that they'll need to save a minimum of £14 million next year, which could result in the loss of a further 339 firefighters and 18 fire engines. More to come.
Online apps have been recommended to help people with lower back pain in a bid to tackle waiting lists on the NHS. 7 platforms have got the green light for people over the age of 16 to manage their condition in early value assessment guidance published by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. According to the NHS long-term plan, lower back pain, the biggest cause of disability, and accounts for 30% of GP consultations.
8 new coins inspired by the King's passion for conservation and the natural world have been unveiled now by the Royal Mint. The new designs, which will feature on coins ranging from the 1p to the £2, will soon start to appear in people's change across the UK. The designs are also inspired by flora and fauna, celebrating creatures like the red squirrel, the hazel dormouse and the bee. I didn't know there was a hazel dormouse.
No, I didn't, but there you go.
You learned something.
I quite fancy a red squirrel coin.
Yeah.
There you go. I like a squirrel. Coity's here with all the sport. Good morning.
I thought Anne was doing a tribute to Beatrix Potter there for a second. That was very lovely.
So did I, the hazel
very lovely.
dormouse.
You know, they used to do the coins. They used to, as a kid, they'll never do that anymore, but the football coins. You used to get coin collections of football teams. You used to stick them on the poster, or you used to get them with petrol. Do you remember that?
No.
I remember that.
Yeah. And if there's still a few, they wouldn't even think of doing that these days. Probably because they charge a fortune for them.
They probably would. They would. Now, what's going on with España in the Euros?
In the Euros. Well, Scotland were unlucky yesterday. In fact,
you had high hopes yesterday.
I did have high hopes. It's still not over yet, but I would go as far to say that I think Scotland were robbed yesterday. I think a home decision went against them in Seville. So Spain against Scotland. So it's in the Euros. Scotland just needed a point to mean that they would qualify for next year's Euros. They've been brilliant so far. So they've won 5 out of 5. But to go to Spain is always going to be tricky, of course. But then Scott McTominay had a free kick, and you'd think he was going to lob it into the box. There was a bit of jostling going on, as often happens. Puts the ball straight into the back of the net. Everybody goes crazy. Scotland are 1-0 up. Who would have thought? But then, hang on, something funny's going on. They check the VAR. Oh, no, there was a foul on the goalkeeper. And it's like, there was no foul on the goalkeeper. Then it was, he was slightly offside. So it's honestly, I got to tell you,
that doesn't sound right.
I don't like
slightly offside.
It's, you know what, it was rather like that. It's like, well, this is Spain. We're playing at home against Scotland. Surely we can't lose this game. And I just think it was just very unfortunate. Spain, it has to be said, were probably the better side, but I think Scotland were robbed yesterday. But it's not over yet, though, because if Norway, this is when we start getting technical, if Norway fail to beat Spain at the weekend, that means Scotland will qualify, because it obviously involves other teams that are in the group.
So they could still
Fingers
make it
crossed.
I think they'll be fine. They should be fine. But being Scotland and looking at the history of Scottish football, they are not going to make it very easy for themselves. So it does rely on other results as well. But they've also got 2 other games to play, so I think they'll be absolutely fine.
Let's jockey up. Grand National.
Oh, yeah, Grand National. See, Grand National, this is always a controversial thing, isn't it? Because horses that have died during the Grand National. I think there's been 5.
It's a pretty brutal race.
It really is. It really is brutal. And as the years go on, there's more complaints about it. There's the dying. You've got the people that are absolutely all over horse racing and will not have it change. But obviously, as the new fans of horse racing come around, it's got to be safer. I mean, to cut a long story short, any horse that dies on a course, it can't happen, can it? So they are making changes. So they've announced this today for next year. 40 runners is now going to go down to 34. So whether
so it's
that's
a less crowded sort of...
Exactly. There's also the argument that, therefore, if there's less horses, then the race may be faster, so they may not work. Also, there's an earlier race time. They say the ground will make a difference because it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Back in the old days, it used to be about 3. The run is going to be shorter to the first fence, which means they go slower. Standing start. So there's a lot of changes they are making to make it safer, which can only be a good thing as far as the Grand National is concerned.
Coity, do not move, because I want to talk to you about the rugby.
Oh, OK.
But before we do that,
yes.
Excuse me, at 6:30... Dear me, it's my age. At 6:30, let's remind you of the main news so far today.
Well, in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip should relocate to the southern half in the next 24 hours. The UN says it's impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
With the Ukraine war still raging on and now chaos in the Middle East, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is going to have some serious decisions to make, and we'll talk to him very shortly, in about 10 minutes.
And the Prime Minister will be in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation. But, of course, it is overshadowed by the conflict elsewhere, with the news that British ships and planes will be sent to the Eastern Mediterranean.
OK, let's talk rugby.
Oh, you want to do rugby now?
I do,
well,
yeah.
OK,
I
well,
do.
It's a huge weekend because it's the
quarterfinals
of the Rugby World Cup. England are playing Fiji, and Fiji have said, it's fighting talk from Fiji, that they are going to win. They're going to humble England. They're certain they're going to win. Fiji have been, well, let's face it, they did beat England in the summer at Twickenham, which was a surprise. So, and England haven't been terribly convincing. So it is going to be a tricky game. There's no question about that. So that's on Sunday. The big one is France. Well, I say the big one, they're all big. France versus South Africa, that so many people are talking about. And the hosts against the holders. Wales are going to be playing Argentina, who England have already beaten. Right. And I think Wales are kind of like under the radar a little bit here, going through to the semi-final. And if Wales should beat Argentina, they will play the winner of Ireland or New Zealand, which also is a huge game. Yeah. And Ireland, who have truly come to form. It seems that every World Cup, you know, they're great before the World Cup and then the World Cup comes along and it just doesn't seem to work for them at that point. But if they're ever going to win the World Cup, I think this is going to be the year. It's a huge weekend.
Fabulous. Paul, we shall see you later on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Do stay with us, because coming up, the Grinch who stopped ULEZ. We'll be discussing that and more in our Headline Makers.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you.
every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other pay-per-review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 6:34, good morning. Let's have a look at some of the front pages for you. And the Express leads on what it calls horrific images released of reported murder of Israeli babies by Hamas militants.
Israel shows mutilated babies is the headline in The Times.
The Sun... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say you don't really need much more than that, do you?
No, The Sun focuses on one murdered child and asks in the light of her death why the FA won't light up Wembley in Israeli colours tonight.
The Eye focuses on the UK and the US urging Israeli restraint as they send military aid to the region.
The Mail says Rishi Sunak has told police to get a grip on anti-Israeli hate.
And something a bit different in the Daily Star, as you can imagine. Their headline, psycho scumbag bedbugs are hiding in our drawers.
I suppose it's a bit
I don't know what to say about that.
No. Let's go through some of the headlines then with Deputy Political Editor of The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikalova, and the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Freddie, let's have a look at The Mail to begin with, should we? And the PM saying, you know, police have really got to tackle anti-Israeli sentiment in the UK in the wake of what we're seeing.
Yes, I think the government is reacting to quite a lot of public disgust at what seem to be celebrations of terror at the weekend, and there are laws in place for dealing with this. Glorification of terrorism is a crime, and there are also hate laws which might be used. But 2 Jewish schools in London have said they were closing to protect their pupils. There haven't been attacks on Jewish schools in London. I've seen people saying there have been, and there haven't been. So it's important to keep things, true.
No, but it's interesting that they do feel the need to shut down.
That, I mean, obviously that's terrible that they do, and there have been there's vandalism at the kosher restaurant and so on. Although again, there's some debate about whether that was explicitly anti-Semitic, but you'll get people bragging about that all the time. The overlying fact is that hate crime incidents have increased 400%, I think, this week. There is clearly strong anti-Semitism in Britain, and it showed itself on the streets over the weekend and on Monday. And the government's going to do something about it, and probably quite right too.
So, I mean, it's frankly a disgrace.
It is, and the other thing that I hope this highlights is that, 2 Jewish schools have decided to close, but even before all this happened, the amount of security that Jewish schools have to put in, I mean, it's extraordinary and really quite shameful that needs to happen. A lot of people have been commenting saying we should be getting, whatever it takes, even the army on the streets to not have a school close, almost on principle. And
well,
I think
our armed forces have got enough to do, sadly.
The debate that's coming, I think, is will we treat people who support Hamas publicly the same as we did with ISIS? And Suella Braverman posted a video last night where she sort of hinted that was the case. She didn't say we will, we won't. She didn't say we're going to strip their passports and kick them out.
They are a prescribed terror organisation.
They are a prescribed terror organisation, but I think in terms of policing it, it would be trickier than ISIS because of the kind of muddle between supporting Palestine and supporting Hamas. And I mean, I think it would be, but we have, somebody in our magazine, Douglas Murray, in our magazine wrote very forcefully that he thinks it could be done very easily. I mean, we have retired Hamas commanders living in London. We have, senior figures from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. I think a lot of people think, we've been a sort of safe haven for people who glorify Hamas for a long time in London, and that needs to change.
OK. Let's have a look at the Telegraph online, Anna. Keir Starmer.
Is it too boring?
I mean, I just love the headline. If Keir Starmer had punched the glitter protester, it'd be on for a landslide.
Yeah, this is Michael Deacon, the excellent Telegraph columnist, saying that he's missed a trick at conference, that he should have punched the guy right back, or not back, sorry. He should have just punched him, and his approval ratings would be through the roof. So
you can sort of see that, really. Not that we want to glorify violence.
Well, I was going to say, it still wouldn't make it the right thing to do, would it?
No.
I think he was having a bit of fun.
I mean, he did look a bit... I can't talk because I'd be wet in the same situation, but he did look a bit wet, didn't he? He looked a bit sort of... You know, he didn't look like he...
Only, I think, when you afterwards replay it, you know everything was OK in the end.
Yeah.
And then also when you see his front bench, so the irony of Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner both looked like they were about to get on the stage and tackle the guy. Look, one thing that people kept on the day talking about was that his own security detail of quite heavy blokes didn't do anything. It was 2 female security guards who tackled the intruder on stage in the end. But no, I think it was, in the moment, a very, very scary, unnerving...
People loved John Prescott when he thumped.
Well, they did. Yes. Just going to say that. Yes, we did, didn't we? Everybody admired him for it.
Everybody, yeah, his standing shot up among the British public. I think the British public does like someone who punches back. But obviously you shouldn't necessarily punch back. And I don't think it makes you boring to not punch someone. I think we should be clear on that.
Yes, yes. It's a very difficult fine line because you don't want to say, yes, go around and hit people, but you can also see why it would have been...
I can't imagine Rishi Sunak punching back.
No.
And even if he did, it probably wouldn't do anything.
It wouldn't work, no.
I think you also don't really... you underestimate the shock value as well. I think he didn't know that it was
what was going on.
He didn't know what was going on, I think...
Well, and as several people have pointed out, the security at Labour conference was so lax compared to the Conservatives, but even compared to the Lib Dems. So there was no sort of airport-style gate to go through. They weren't even screening bags. So you could see how it would be...
He must have been pretty nervous beforehand, too. I mean, this was probably the biggest speech
I thought
in
his hands
career.
were shaking when they did the video of him taking off the jacket.
Yes.
I mean, he still I think most people on the day said, right, he handled it very well. He kept us cool.
Yes,
he kept his cool. He got on with it.
And
he got on with his speech.
He got on with it, which actually shows he can, which you need for the job, be able to keep your head.
Well, I wouldn't want to be in that position, I have to say. Just say, it's all only glitter, but you don't necessarily know at the time.
Maybe in the next hour we'll come in and we'll...
throw glitter over us.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Oh, I might punch you, Freddie, you never know. Now, let's talk bed bugs, should we?
Do we have to?
We've got this... we've got a video, I think, of suspected bed bugs on the London Underground. Oh, we have not got that video. So try and pull that up for you. Here we go.
Oh, no.
So there you go. So that could be a bed bug, Freddie.
That's meant to be on the Victoria line, the London Underground. That looks a little bit more like a bed bug than that one, which I think looks like an ant, if you can make it out.
Can't see that one.
And I mean, the point is that we did... Ooh, there's something that looks a bit bed buggy. We did see them on the Paris Underground, didn't we, last week?
Yes,
and now they're on the London Underground.
And they've been spotted in Manchester as well.
Well, so I think we Brits got this slightly wrong because we tried to say it was a big French problem and make a big drama about how it might come to London. But Rent-A-Kill and various people have been saying for a long time the bed bug problem's really bad here. It's been bad here for a couple of years. And it's getting worse. I do think slightly this has become an odd media obsession. I think it's becoming the new AI.
Yes,
It's just, we talk about
5G.
bed bugs a lot. And the reality is no one's quite sure whether are they that big? I thought they were invisible.
I thought they were invisible, bed bugs. But you couldn't tell you had them until you got bitten.
There's a lot of mystery about what a bed bug actually is. And everybody just seems to quite like sharing videos of their horror.
Yes, and I think you're right. It's a media obsession now.
A media obsession, and showing squeamishness is a sort of.
So let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about it. Let's move on.
So really, Keir Starmer should boost his ratings by tackling some bed bugs.
Yes, showing real courage.
I'll tell you what, though, it is the stuff of nightmares, isn't it? Don't let the bed bugs bite and all that. We always used to say to people, but
people are obsessed with it. Yeah.
Grim. Well, if you've got bed bugs and you want to share, feel free to get in touch. GB Views it.
No, we don't want to see them.
I don't know. I just sort of think, what do you do if you find you've got bed bugs? How do you get rid of them? Do you have to get Rent-A-Kill in?
You have to get professionals around, apparently. Yeah.
Some people think you have to throw your bed away if it's.
I'd be
they've got
tempted to do that.
into the mattress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. It's
very expensive.
Anything worse. The trouble is now we'll all be panicking if you wake up and you've got like a little itchy spot or something. You'll be thinking you've been bitten by bed bugs.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Why is it when you start talking about
You
About things like that, you start itching, don't you? Scratching.
Head lice and all the rest of it.
Stop
now.
it. No,
it's true, though, isn't it? It's true.
No.
Maybe head lice only go for clean hair. Maybe bed bugs only go for clean beds.
Well, I think that's
probably true.
My children often have nits, but it never comes to me. Yeah, regularly. They did last week.
That's why you're itching.
But they never get to me because my hair's disgusting. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's a lovely thought. Thanks very much indeed. OK, look, you two, hang about because we want to get your analysis on what the Defence Secretary has to say, because we're going to talk to him in just a moment. But first, as we head towards 6:45, let's just remind you of the main news today.
Well, in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip should relocate to the southern half in the next 24 hours. The UN says it's impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
The Prime Minister will be in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation, but it's overshadowed by the conflict elsewhere, with news that British ships and planes will be sent to the eastern Mediterranean.
And as councils across the land scrap their Christmas lights, markets and trees in order to save money, we'll be debating, is it right for councils to cancel Christmas? That's in about half an hour's time. Can't believe we're talking Christmas
already. I know, it's in the shops and everything. Anyway, look, let's talk about what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps joins us now. Good morning to you. It's good to see you. What can the UK do? I know we're sending some ships to the Eastern Med, which is meant to, stop supplies of weapons getting into Hamas. But diplomatically, militarily, what are our options?
Yes, that's right. We're sending not just ships, but also aircraft to really monitor the situation, provide surveillance, provide the potential for humanitarian aid, but also to act as a deterrent in the wider region that others who might want to get involved in, at the moment, what is essentially a terrorist organization having attacked Israel and Israel's response. And we don't want to see other organizations thinking, oh, this is an opportunity to exploit that situation. So Britain's sending that assistance. But also, for example, I was at NATO yesterday talking to my fellow defense ministers. We had a briefing on the Israel situation. There's a huge amounts of diplomatic work goes on in the background as well.
We're all sort of scratching our heads over this and thinking, what can politicians do? What can you do that might actually bring this to a speedy end?
Well, I think it's really important that we don't see this widen up into a more regional conflict. And so one of the things that we can do is something that the UK is perhaps uniquely or more uniquely positioned to do, which is to ensure that we have assets, those boats and aircraft in the region to assist. Now, that can be partly practical because we can monitor what's going on both from the air and also provide assistance from the sea. Remember, some of those attacks from Hamas came in from the sea, for example. But really, I think it's a question of providing a sort of package of support, making sure that we're speaking to the leaders on all sides. You know that the Prime Minister spoke to the Egyptian leadership president yesterday. We've been speaking to the Israeli side. And trying to ensure that Israel, who have an absolute right to defend themselves, given the appalling and disgusting terrorist attacks that they were subject to. And by the way, again at NATO yesterday in Brussels, we were subject to seeing the videos of what went on, the Hamas videos where they beheaded people. And really, when you see the extent of what Israel is up against, it's horrific. There is no other way to describe this but pure and simple terrorism.
Look, and I think most people would agree with you, but war is a dirty business, sadly. What does the government actually make of Israel's response? Because it is inevitable that the response is going to mean civilian deaths in Gaza, and we've seen videos of dead babies in Gaza and all the rest of it. I mean, it's absolutely grim. And the problem with all this is, as you rightly say, Israel has been subject to a horrific terrorist attack and needs to defend itself, but we're seeing civilians suffer in Gaza.
Look, I think the thing to say or to remember is Hamas' entire purpose deliberately is to murder innocent men, women, and children, behead them, rape them, drag them off. Israel has, I think, an absolute right and, in fact, a duty, given what's going on, to go after those terrorists. Those terrorists, of course, are using human beings as human shields and hiding behind them, hiding in their homes. What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area and provide that opportunity for people to get out whilst they pursue the terrorists who are using that human population to try to protect them. So, there is no equivalence between these two. This is a very different approach. Of course, we want to make sure that life is preserved. But what is Israel to do? We'll just have these terrorists here who are going to break in at any time and attack the population with the sole purpose of killing the population, civilians, which is not what Israel is about. Israel's about getting rid of those terrorists.
Sometimes you feel utterly bewildered by what happens in the world. Ukraine, obviously, is a war that's ongoing and must be at the top of your agenda as well. Probably been forgotten by many just in the last few days because of what's happening with Israel. But all of this terrible conflict going on, we can't forget Ukraine either, can we?
Absolutely. And I spent the last 3 days at NATO, as I mentioned. I met President Zelensky for the second time in 2 weeks. I'd actually invited him to come to a contact group, that's about 50 countries, all of them supporting Ukraine in the war against Putin. And I'd asked President Zelensky to come and speak to us and provide an update. So that happened. We're still completely focused on that war in Ukraine, the war in Europe. And as you rightly say, we must not let ourselves be distracted at all by Hamas and the terrorist activity in the Middle East. We also need to make sure, because that's what Putin will have been looking for, we also need to make sure that we keep on with our support for Ukraine. I have to report, actually, that's exactly what happened this last couple of days, with a lot of countries committing to support Ukraine, including the United Kingdom, who led a package, an international package of about £170 million of additional assistance to the Ukrainian fight.
I mean, there's a lot on your plate. What's your position on whether or not it is legal to block aid corridors into Gaza?
Well, look, of course, we want aid to flow, and the United Kingdom provides aid to Palestinians, and the Prime Minister and others have been speaking to, myself included, actually, have been speaking to the Egyptians, for example, about ensuring this aid, and also ensuring that British citizens can leave. But as I say, none of this needs to happen if Hamas hadn't gone in and slaughtered innocent men, women, and children. As I say, I saw the very distressing evidence of this yesterday whilst at NATO. And of course, if Hamas released the people that they have kidnapped and are now holding hostage. So again, Hamas can end this. They started it and they can end it. And we will be supportive of Israel's right to defend itself, given that they're the ones who came under attack.
Minister, good to see you, as always. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. I know you've got a very busy time ahead of you.
Gosh, yes, what a job.
Anna, what do you make of that? I mean, I have to say, I thought that was actually phrased very well when you look at the complexity of the issue. And, of course, there's a lot of concern about what is going on in Gaza. That's perfectly natural. But the way the Defence Secretary put it there in what is Israel to do under the circumstances, I thought actually was quite clear.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would agree with that, particularly looking at all the evidence of the horror inflicted by Hamas. I think what he didn't do is what some of his Tory MP colleagues are calling for, which is go further in ensuring that there is safe passage into Egypt for aid workers and civilians who can flee. He also didn't mention the fact that, he mentioned that there are warning systems to phones, but the electricity and water are cut off. So without electricity, people can't actually charge those phones. They can't actually get those warnings, presumably. So those are the things I think we're looking for the government to say a bit more on.
I thought it was also interesting when he said, Hamas's sole purpose is to kill Israelis. That's not quite right, and also it doesn't.
But they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. That's
yes, that is true. But what he doesn't acknowledge or didn't acknowledge is that Netanyahu has to some extent cultivated Hamas because he saw them as a useful counterweight to the PLO and to Fatah and to other pro-Palestinian groups. And obviously, that's not to say that Israel deserves to be attacked or anything crazy like that. But we should acknowledge that, this has been a big failure by Israel because they have let Hamas, and they've even sort of allowed Hamas and encouraged, in some ways, Hamas to grow. And they've also had a spectacular failure of intelligence.
Yeah, well, look, we haven't got anyone from the Israeli government to respond to that. I would imagine they would respond quite vehemently against.
Well, I think they'd admit that they've had a failure of intelligence.
Oh, a failure of intelligence, definitely. Yeah, that's been pretty clear.
But you just look at the geography and you can't figure out how this is ever going to end peacefully.
No.
Well,
the geography makes it impossible.
The world's most insoluble problem, and it has been for a very long time.
Yeah.
I was asking everybody earlier how you count your blessings at times like this, and Wendy's been in touch. Hi, Wendy. She says, my 8 grandchildren are my blessings. I live and breathe for them. I just pray the world becomes a better place for them, but it looks like it's getting worse.
Well, sadly, it seems right at the moment, but who knows where we'll be this time next year. Let's hope we are in a better place. Anna, Freddie, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you a little bit later on. Let's get a check on the weather for you with Alex.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Alex Burkill, and here's your latest GB News weather update on this wet and windy Friday. We do have some colder weather to come this weekend, but for the time being, it's a wet and windy picture across the bulk of the UK. Heavy rain across many parts of England and Wales. The highest rainfall totals likely to be building up over the Welsh mountains, but for many, it's a wet picture. And in the south, we could see some heavy, thundery downpours developing as we go through the afternoon. Brighter further north, but blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A chilly feel here, milder towards the south with highs of around 21 or 22 Celsius. Some further heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across the south-southeast, but that rain does clear away as we go through the night. And then we have quite a few places seeing clear skies overnight. Some showers, though, piling down on a cold northerly wind, so particularly around Irish Sea coastal areas and towards the north of Scotland. But with clear skies, many places are going to wake up on Saturday morning to a chilly start. A touch of frost, especially in the north, but then it should be a mostly bright morning. We are going to see showers continuing to pile down on that northerly wind, and they are going to become more widespread as we go into the afternoon. Across Scotland, some of those showers could be wintry over the higher ground, so some sleet or snow possible here. And it's going to be a cold day. Temperatures markedly down compared to where they were last weekend, getting to highs of just 14 or 15 Celsius.
Well, if only we had answers for you. We don't, and in fact, nobody does. That's the problem when it comes to what we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment. And yet, all we can do is present you with the facts of what is going on, and you've got to come to your own conclusions. But certainly, as the Defence Secretary said, Israel has been the subject of the most horrific terrorist attack, and those images which he saw yesterday, clarifying that for him.
Well, we'll bring you up to date with all of the latest news on that and more coming up.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Well, it is 9 o'clock in Israel and Gaza. Over 1 million people there are ordered to flee south in just 24 hours by Israel. As Benjamin Netanyahu swears in his new war cabinet, the UN says the situation is dire. The combined death toll reaches 2,700 people. Well, it's 7 o'clock here in the UK, and it's Friday, the 13th of October. Today.
Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, dropping 6,000 bombs on Hamas targets over the past 6 days, killing over 1,400 people. Human Rights Watch accuses Israel of using the controversial munition white phosphorus, but the IDF says that it is not currently aware of their use.
The Israeli Prime Minister warns of difficult days ahead as he swears in his new war cabinet. The country's top general admits the military failed to protect its citizens. Our reporter Charlie Peters is in Tel Aviv.
Hundreds of targets hit overnight as Israel orders an evacuation of Gaza in a likely indicator of an incoming invasion.
And in the last few minutes, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told us that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs and leaflets will help civilians to flee.
What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area.
The Prime Minister's in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation, but of course it's overshadowed by the conflicts elsewhere, with news that British ships and planes will be sent to the eastern Mediterranean.
And as councils across the UK scrap their Christmas lights, markets and trees in order to save money, we'll be debating, is it right for them to cancel Christmas? That's coming up in just a few moments.
And of course we'll have a check on the weather for you this morning with Alex.
Good morning. It's going to turn colder for this weekend, but before then, we have a wet and windy day today. I'll have more in a second.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip should relocate to the southern half in the next 24 hours.
The UN says this would mean over 1 million people having to flee, saying that it is impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
Well, as the escalation of this decades-long conflict enters its seventh day, the death toll on the Israeli side has hit 1,300. The number killed in Gaza, more than 1,400. The United Nations says food and water are running out fast in Gaza, and 50,000 pregnant women are now unable to access essential services.
So as Israel reels from the human devastation inflicted on it by Hamas terrorists, and its allies rally around it in a show of support, Israeli ground forces gather around Gaza as a likely ground invasion looms. The World Trade Organization is warning that if the conflict spreads to the region, it could have a hugely negative impact on already weak global trade flows.
There's uncertainty about whether this is going to spread further to the whole region, which could impact very much on global economic growth. There is uncertainty as to when it will end. It is most unfortunate.
Well, in the last few minutes, the Defence Secretary told Breakfast that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs and leaflets will help civilians flee.
Israel has, I think, an absolute right and, in fact, a duty, given what's going on, to go after those terrorists. Those terrorists, of course, are using human beings as human shields and hiding behind them, hiding in their homes. What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area and provide that opportunity for people to get out.
Well, let's talk to our reporter, Charlie Peters, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Bring us up to date, Charlie.
Well, yes, overnight we heard that the Israeli liaison officers with the United Nations issuing that evacuation order to northern Gaza, where over 1.1 million people have been called on to flee in 24 hours. It comes amid a significant bombing campaign which ramped up even further last night. The IDF saying in the last hour that they hit some 750 targets in the Gaza Strip. They say they're targeting Hamas military capabilities, hitting air defense assets and residential areas where Hamas militants stay, but also they say they're targeting the leadership and personnel and trying to strike Hamas terrorist leaders wherever they find them. But of course, the problem in the Gaza Strip, in this one of the most densely populated places in the world, is that the Hamas terrorists have embedded themselves among the civilian population. Commentators have said for decades that Hamas uses the civilians in the Gaza Strip as human shields. This, they say, allows them to evade the level of retaliation that one might expect amid rocket barrages from the Gaza Strip into Israel, and also some of the atrocities that we've heard reports of since Saturday morning in southern Israel. Well, Israel has many tactics and strategies for warning civilians about incoming attacks, particularly before the Israeli Air Force launches direct targeted strikes in the Gaza Strip. We've heard of this knock and drop situation where on high-rise buildings they will thud the roof with disarmed munition to let everyone know there's a warning, they need to leave urgently because a serious munition is coming in very shortly. There are leaflets. There have been reports in the last few days of the Israeli cyber forces actually hacking into TV networks and showing different screens on warning people to leave the Gaza Strip and head south if they can, head into the border crossing area with Egypt. But also, we've also seen leafleting and other efforts now. But this move, the liaison officers calling for that evacuation south to the Wadi Gaza, a small wetlands area in the middle of the Gaza Strip, that is the biggest warning to civilians for many, many years, to get out of the north of the Gaza Strip. And it's an indicator and warning of that incoming invasion to the Gaza Strip, which now seems much more likely than it did even just last night. The Israelis have been shaping the ground for many days since the Hamas terrorist invasion on Saturday morning. They've been bombing targets, amassing troops on the south, and also securing their own territory, still fighting with terrorists in southern Israel, as late as last night, terrorists who went to ground after committing some of those appalling atrocities that we've heard reports of since Saturday in the kibbutzim in southern Israel. But of course, as they amass those forces on the south, those armoured convoys and hundreds of thousands of troops, they still need to secure the rest of the country. In the north of Israel, there are rockets coming in from southern Lebanon. There is shelling from Syria, and there are also fears that that situation may escalate and that people, proxies of Iran and what they describe themselves as the axis of resistance, may improve on their capabilities and launch new strikes to sustain the effort as Israel creaks from the ongoing conflict and war on its borders.
There must be a real sense of fear, just where you are at the moment, of ordinary people. There must be an absolute sense of fear. Can you describe that for us? What are the people saying?
I think the people here, well, there is terror. There is terror in the air. Many of the people here in Tel Aviv have fled from the south, or they're preparing to go out to war, and they've seen the butchery, the ISIS-style butchery as described by Benjamin Netanyahu in his press conference with the US Secretary of State yesterday. They are really trying to draw a comparison here between Hamas terrorists and ISIS, showing that this is a new level of depravity by those terrorists. And I imagine that while that attracts a lot of support from the rest of the world and is a part of the war effort, not just on the ground, but also to win over the hearts and minds of the world, it is no doubt also instilling quite a lot of fear in the local civilian population and those who are being sent to fight these ISIS-compared terrorists, both in the south but also in the north. But also we've seen an enormous amount of resilience. People in Tel Aviv coming together to resource, supply and support their people however they can. Volunteer organisations have sprung up very suddenly and further conflict goes on, but support from civilians is ongoing.
OK, Charlie, thanks very much indeed. Well, we'll stick with Tel Aviv, where we can talk to diplomatic correspondent for the Times of Israel, Lazar Berman. Good to see you this morning. I mean, diplomatic correspondent, I mean, diplomacy seems to be sort of bottom of the agenda at the moment. I mean, if there is... We're going to see a significant escalation in violence before there's any talking, aren't we?
I think that is inevitable. You are correct. What diplomacy there is the world showing support for Israel. We've had European foreign ministers. Obviously, we had a foreign secretary in, I believe it was 2 days ago. The days are kind of running together. We had Secretary of State Antony Blinken in, and there will be other European and Western leaders who come to Israel to show support, much like they did in Kyiv in the early days of the Russian invasion there. But I think that you're correct. There is no question that the Israeli appetite for a ground invasion is actually very high. In the past, Israel has done whatever it could when it fought against Hamas to end the fighting with some airstrikes, some warnings, to raise deterrence. But now it looks inevitable that Israeli leaders are talking about making sure that they make the Hamas terrorist government collapse in the Gaza Strip, that when we come out of this war, whenever that happens, and it might be weeks or months, that Hamas will no longer be in control of the Gaza Strip, and most importantly, will not be in a position to carry out this kind of butcheries that you've been reporting on for the last couple of days and that I've seen with my own eyes as well.
Yeah, I mean, you said there it could be days, it could be months. What do you think will happen next? Will there be a ground invasion force, for instance?
Yes, I think that will happen. The question is when. Israel doesn't want to broadcast its intentions, too clearly, but there's kind of not much they can do to ultimately hide it. There's no way to hide hundreds of thousands of troops on the border. The tanks, the APCs, they make a lot of noise. And at some point, that invasion is going to happen. And you were referring to the warnings that Israel gives to civilians in the Gaza Strip. That's not something they have to do by law. That's not something that even other Western democracies tend to do. It's something that's part of the IDF values, part of Israeli values, to do what they can, obviously, in an impossible situation to minimize civilian casualties, but that also gives away some of the operational security. So that invasion, I believe, is in the offing. I see that Israel is taking its time. It's trying not to rush into everything. It's making sure that the somewhat difficult logistical situation, let's be honest here, is taken care of. We have reports of especially reservist troops saying that the equipment they got, some of it is from the 67 war or 73 war. They're asking friends and supporters at home and around the world to send in what they need. So I think that is going to slow the preparation down a little bit, but we see that the IDF feels like it has time. International partners are saying, we are behind you. You don't only have the right, but you have a duty to take care of the Hamas terrorist organization. So Israel feels like it's not rushed, and it is taking this slowly. It is doing it deliberately. But I really think that a ground invasion is in the offing. And when it happens, I know there are, already from an airstrikes, it's difficult to see, but there is a lot of devastation in the Gaza Strip. That's the nature of this thing. That is what Hamas has brought on itself and the civilians it's supposed to be taken care of. A ground invasion will likely cause even more devastation. Protecting troops in these highly built-up areas. You have some of your viewers who are in the military back in the UK know this. That's very difficult and takes a lot of gunfire, a lot of firepower, and it's much less precise than Israeli strikes from the air, which tend to be very precise. So this is probably going to escalate, as you said, and it will not be days. It might not even be weeks. This might be months of fighting because Israel seems very determined now to make sure nothing like the butchery that we've seen ever happens again.
We're almost out of time, Lazar. I just wanted to get your take on why this is happening at all. Why do you think Hamas, what is the thinking behind Hamas doing what it has done? Because it must have known the consequences. It must have known what the response was going to be.
It's a very good question, and I've had that conversation yesterday, and Secretary of Blinken opined yesterday at the press conference in Tel Aviv, and he said it's just pure evil. That's the only way he could make sense of it. When we try to get in the minds of groups like Hamas, ISIS, it's just not something that registers on our own value set. We think those who are responsible for civilians, and let's not forget, Hamas runs basically a statelet. Hamastan is what the Gaza Strip is. They have ministries, they have a military, they have schools. We think that their responsibility would be to take care of the welfare of their citizens, of their civilians, spend money on schools, hospitals, and networks. But we've seen that they pulled up pipes, they turned those into rockets. It doesn't seem like that the welfare of the civilians is in their interest. So what were they thinking? I'll tell you what, Israel was fooled. Israel was told, Israeli journalists, Israeli government, we told ourselves that Hamas actually does care about the governance in the Gaza Strip. They want to prove that they are an alternative to the corrupt Palestinian Authority, and they want to show that they can govern better. What they really want is a port into Gaza. They want more work permits. Israel gave tens of thousands of work permits to workers to work in these kibbutzim that were attacked. But it seems like that was not their interest. It seems like that their extremist religious ideology, murder Jews, become martyrs, that type of thing is what is driving them. And maybe they underestimated Israeli society. Maybe they thought Israel would fall to its knees, beg for a ceasefire, start releasing thousands of terrorists in prisons, as Israel has done in the past when there was 1 or 2 Israelis kidnapped. We remember the Gilad Shalit case where there was that soldier that was kidnapped in 2006, and over 1,000 terrorists were released to let him go. So maybe they thought that having more than 100 kidnapped Israeli civilians and soldiers would be that trump card and would give them that asset which would force Israel not to respond. But I think it's clear that they have miscalculated, that they are going to pay a very heavy price. And unfortunately, the entire region will pay a price because of Hamas's crimes.
OK. Lazar Berman, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
I must say, there's something very stunning as well about seeing Secretary of State Blinken, Grant Shapps, just a few minutes ago. Grown men who are very used to, their sort of role in society, they look shocked and stunned and very pale. There's something horrible about seeing very experienced politicians looking so terribly stunned.
Well, look, there are gruesome pictures on both sides of this. However, the Telegraph has actually printed. This is the post that Israel put on X yesterday. This is the most difficult image we've ever posted. As we're writing this, we're shaking. We went back and forth about posting this, but we need each and every one of you to know this happened. And they have in the inside pages, the Telegraph has published the picture, and it is of a baby that has been shot many times. And it's unbelievable.
It is, yeah.
And it's enough to shake anybody, frankly.
Well, back home, members of Britain's Jewish community will be given more protection against anti-Semitic attacks because the conflict has inflamed so many community tensions. That is according to the Prime Minister. Well, the Community Security Trust, an organisation established to provide security to British Jews, has reported nearly 140 anti-Semitic incidents in the last 4 days. They're going to get £3 million to help protect the community. Well, our reporter Lisa Hartle has been speaking with the community in North London, and she's live there for us in Golders Green. Morning, Lisa. What have people been telling you?
Hello, yes.
Oh. Didn't get very far there, did I?
We didn't. No, that line's gone down. Have we got her back? Yeah, let's
too far away.
Let's just see. No, it's not far away. Let's just see if we can get that line up and running, because it's important to know what the community's saying. Okay. Go on then, Lisa, fire away.
I'm hearing... Can you hear me now?
Can.
Hopefully you can hear me now. So I'm in Golders Green, which has a large Jewish community, and throughout the week I've been speaking to members of the Jewish community here in London, and they've all said the same thing. They're heartbroken over the conflict, but they're also extremely concerned for possible repercussions for them here in the UK. And as you said, yesterday we heard that the government's pledging an additional £3 million to that community security trust. They provide security for Jewish schools, synagogues, and they've also said that they've had an increase of 324% this week in reports of anti-Semitism. We've also heard reports that today at least 3 schools, Jewish schools in North London, are closing, and that comes after additional security concerns after a former head of Hamas called for global protests. Now, and we're going to hear now from 2 women I've spoken to this week about how they're feeling at the moment about their situation in the UK.
Grandchildren are now going to nurseries with guards with guns, you know, security guards here in London to be protected. And also I have family in Israel, and they're all absolutely devastated. It's just beyond words, and I just feel sorry for all the innocents, the Gazan people and the Israelis.
Everybody has got their heart in their mouths and is in a state of very high anxiety and fear. I've got a friend I go out and have restaurant meals with and share birthday celebrations. She wants to take every single one of her 5 grandchildren out of their schools and homeschool them because she thinks they're in danger if they're in their Jewish schools.
Earlier this week, I spoke to the CEO of that security company, and Mark Gardner, and he said that security in Jewish schools is so tight already. He said someone who wasn't Jewish that would go into one of these schools would be shocked at the levels that they have. They try and build schools away from roads to avoid the possibility of car bombs. They have special protective film over windows. They have infrared technology and CCTV that's fed back into their main central hub 24 hours a day. He said, but despite that, and with this increase in the reports of anti-Semitism, they're going to be seeing an increase in police presence and additional guards within schools. Anything that they can do to try and ensure that pupils and other members of the Jewish community are as safe as possible.
OK, Lisa, for now, thanks very much indeed. I mean, it's a shocking
It
situation.
is absolutely disgraceful.
I cannot understand why people hate each other so much. I mean, and what has anyone over here got to do directly with anything else? Just let people live their lives. Shocks me to the core.
It's bewildering, isn't it? It is utterly bewildering.
Meanwhile, amidst all of this, the Prime Minister is joining Northern European leaders at a summit in Sweden today. They're going to talk about the conflict in Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, the meeting of the UK-led defence grouping had been expected, of course, to see leaders focus on the threat from Russia, as the war in Ukraine can't be forgotten, can it?
No, but the attack by Hamas has pushed that region to the top of the agenda.
And this comes as the Prime Minister already has confirmed the UK will send Royal Navy vessels and a surveillance aircraft to the Eastern Mediterranean to help support Israel. And
I mean, crucially, what we're told is that is to try to stop munitions getting into Gaza, which is what the concern is over the aid corridors amidst all of this. And, of course, a lot of people saying that those aid corridors, including the United Nations, saying the aid corridors need to be opened up.
But the worry is that that would allow munitions to be taken in, smuggled in.
That's the concern, which is a Hobson's choice, isn't it, on that one? Horrific. Look, we're going to keep you up to date with all of this, of course, but in the meantime, let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Alex Burkill, and here's your latest GB News weather update on this wet and windy Friday. We do have some colder weather to come this weekend, but for the time being, it's a wet and windy picture across the bulk of the UK. Heavy rain across many parts of England and Wales. The highest rainfall totals likely to be building up over the Welsh mountains, but for many, it's a wet picture. And in the south, we could see some heavy, thundery downpours developing as we go through the afternoon. Brighter further north, but blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A chilly feel here, milder towards the south with highs of around 21 or 22 Celsius. Some further heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across the south-southeast, but that rain does clear away as we go through the night. And then we have quite a few places seeing clear skies overnight. Some showers, though, piling down on a cold northerly wind, so particularly around Irish Sea coastal areas and towards the north of Scotland. But with clear skies, many places are going to wake up on Saturday morning to a chilly start. A touch of frost, especially in the north, but then it should be a mostly bright morning. We are going to see showers continuing to pile down on that northerly wind, and they are going to become more widespread as we go into the afternoon. Across Scotland, some of those showers could be wintry over the higher ground, so some sleet or snow possible here. And it's going to be a cold day. Temperatures markedly down compared to where they were last weekend, getting to highs of just 14 or 15 Celsius.
Wintry weather.
Wintry weather. Well, maybe that's not a bad thing.
We're going to talk Christmas in a moment.
Yes, we are.
Sorry, but we really are.
Yes. Should Christmas towns, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Our towns have Christmas lights on and the trees and all that sort of thing, or should it all be stopped to save money? Yeah. What do you think?
But twinkly lights, that's what Christmas is about.
Let us know.
We'll be talking about that in a moment.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 7:28. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
It certainly is. Now, we're going to talk Christmas. Sorry about it, but we are. Cash-strapped councils across England are apparently scrapping their Christmas lights and markets, and they're cutting back on trees because of the cost of living crisis, as locals complain about the lack of festive spirit.
You can't be complaining yet. I don't believe I was complaining about a lack of festive
Well, I think
spirit
there's a
at the
lot of whinging
moment.
going on already.
You'd moan if the Christmas lights were out already. Anyway, multiple towns and boroughs are facing budgetary challenges. Well, we know that's the case. And so several of them have pulled the Christmas lights completely in moves critics have said are effectively cancelling Christmas.
I don't know whether it is cancelling Christmas, but for instance, Medway Council in Kent became the latest this week to stop those sort of switch-ons. And so today we're debating, should Christmas lights be cancelled and the money perhaps spent in other places?
Let's talk to Jess Barclay and former Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall, who join us now. What do you make, Jess? What do you think of it all?
I think it's kind of insulting, to be honest. If I was cancelling Christmas based on a school budget, I wouldn't have had Christmas for like the last 4 years, and I'm actually going into even trickier Christmas this year for lots of personal reasons. I made the papers last year for doing Christmas on £63, and it'll be similar, if not less, of a budget this year, unfortunately. I think we've got very wrapped up in the consumerism side of Christmas. I think we're all aware of it, and unfortunately, it's not all or nothing. Christmas is about community and bringing people together. What an amazing chance to bring people together to say, look, we haven't got our normal budget. What as a community can we do to make Christmas magical and special? Some of the budgets they're talking about, they say, oh, we haven't got £75,000. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean we just don't do it. My bathroom recently leaked and I had to redo it and I had zero budget. It doesn't mean that I just don't do it. I've spoken to my community and I've got them involved and I've got friends involved. And if I could do that for a bathroom, why can't we do that more on a community level to make Christmas special?
I'm all for that. I think it's a great idea, being thrifty, but there's still something wonderful about twinkling lights, isn't there? Don't you think, Claire, it's actually rather important that those twinkling lights put a smile on all our faces?
Well, I think you're right, especially when the high street is facing some really tough times at the moment. But I do think Jess highlights something really important. This is about communities getting involved. It's about local businesses getting involved. My local area of Sevenoaks, they have 2 sponsors for their Christmas lights and displays. And my local shopping centre here in my village has a local business who puts a Christmas tree up every year with decorations free of charge. That's his donation. And I think that that is the way that we should be looking at it. Councils are under enormous pressure with what they have to fund. And in the case of Medway Council, it's a unitary authority and they've spent £33 million alone in the last 3 years investing in children's care services, for example. So I think that whilst Christmas is very, very important for the community, we also need to look at the pressures on local councils, the statutory responsibilities that they have, and the money that isn't coming in from central government grants any further. Most places have had that cut, Medway by 91%, Sevenoaks by 100%. So that's quite a dent. So I think we need a little bit more fiscal responsibility and a little bit more community spirit.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem here, Jess, is the idea that not putting Christmas lights up is seen as cancelling Christmas. When of course it isn't, is it? I mean, as you point out, there's lots we can do without sort of cancelling the joy of the festive season.
I think a big one with lights is the scale of them. Why not make it a magical focal point and be like, right, we're going to do the tree and we're going to have a couple of get-togethers of carol singing throughout December. That's much cheaper than putting the lights together. I love going carol singing. And if they reached out to the community, I think people are often surprised how much people are willing to give. I mean, I've certainly been shocked with the bathroom and how much people have been willing to give. I'm very much reminded when I was reading this article, my favourite Christmas display is a little town in Cornwall called Lelant. It's not even a town, it's probably like a little pass-through. And they do the lights themselves. They literally have like a colour theme. So they're all got similar lights. It is so simple and it is absolutely stunning. And it doesn't cost the council anything. And they all use the same lights every year. So it's not that it costs the village loads of money. It's not that it's costing the community loads of money. It's just a little bit of tradition, community come together. And it's my favourite Christmas lights.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know why you have to have new lights every year.
No.
Bring out the old ones. But I don't know. I guess if you were to say to people, you can either have your Christmas lights or you can have an extra refuse collection, I'd probably go for the extra bin collection.
Yeah. And what do you think? Do you think, Claire, that's really where people are at the moment?
I think it's really hard because people don't understand council spending. We all pay our council tax and we see this enormous amount of money go out and we don't entirely understand where it goes. And I've sat on many, many long budgetary meetings at the local council. And it's quite interesting when you see where your money goes, you then understand the pressures. So I think people want their refuse collected, but I also think that they do want to feel that the council cares about them, cares about the area and wants to celebrate with them. And I just want to give a big mention to the New Ash Green Village social group who are putting on a Santa's sleigh. They're doing carol singing in the village centre and all of this doesn't cost the council taxpayer. This is a group of volunteers and I'm really looking forward to it. So I think we need more of that and not perhaps the council spending our money on it.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree. Jess, Claire, good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
And just a reminder of the date, it's actually Friday the 13th of October. So don't worry, it's nowhere near Christmas yet.
No, that's just Friday the 13th. Talking of Grinch and being tight over Christmas and things, though, Paul Coyte's here.
Why on earth would you say that? Why on earth would you say that?
I just couldn't help myself.
I'm the most ungrinchly person.
Are you?
I'm ungrinchly.
Do you do a full display?
See, now I've said that,
You're now
going to be expecting presents at Christmas and everything that I'll have to... But no, I don't like over-lighting. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Too much is too much. But also... Yeah, I remember when I was a kid and we go... Should we go to Regent Street to see the lights? I don't think people do that anymore.
Oh, they do.
Do they still go, let's go and see the lights?
See the lights, yeah.
Are they as good? But I don't know whether they were as impressive.
Well, they were brilliant last year.
But again, sponsored though, weren't they? That's the thing, sponsored.
Yeah, I hate that, though. When they're very commercially sponsored.
Because it's advertising.
That's where the money comes from, I know.
Quite the same, but let's go to London and see the lit up adverts.
Yes.
I tell you what, we need a switch on because you haven't yet.
I've not done a switch on. No, I'm the only one here who hasn't done an official switch on.
Throughout your career have you practiced it? Because I imagine, how many have you done?
I've done quite a few switch ons, and it's brilliant.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And now. Stephen Dixon, things like that. The lights don't work. There's like 3 lights. Sort of,
yeah, that'll be it, won't it? Switch on. It'll be a light bulb hanging.
Well, we'll all come and see you do that. Whatever that may be, I'm looking forward to that.
You can cheer me on. Let's talk Euro 2024.
Yes, we had better. And well, I mean, I do want to mention first because England, Australia, and when we talk about lights, there's a huge controversy, obviously, about Wembley Stadium at the moment.
Yes.
And this is the arch which is lit up and. After what happened at the weekend, it was expected that the Israeli flag would be lit up. The FA have made the decision that they are not going to do that. Now,
they light it up for everything else.
They do. Well, this is it. There's so many different things. Ukraine colours, it's been lit up after the Paris terror attacks in 2015. It was lit up in the French flag, but they've decided against it.
They've decided not to.
They have decided not to, and I don't know whether it's fear, whether it's fear of reprisals, whether it's fear of that they're not making the right decision, that they'll embarrass themselves or others, whatever the reason is, they have decided against it. And when it comes to the actual game, it's England and Australia that are playing tonight.
Yeah.
They've also made a point, this is all moved away from the game, saying that only England and Australia shirts or flags will be allowed, no Israeli flags, I think Palestinian. They're trying to keep it away from that.
You see, the problem with that is, Paul, that they're making it... I don't want to drag you into the politics of it all, but they're making it... whether you're pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, which isn't the argument, actually. It's about Hamas being a terror organisation.
Correct. I agree with that. But they fear. I mean, I would guess, I don't know, because nothing really has been put out. The Premier League are doing similar as well. They are saying that they're having minute silence, and the way they are doing it is saying it's for the innocent people that have lost their lives. This is what they're doing it on, for the innocents that have lost their lives. They're trying to keep away from anything political, but in a situation like that, it's still going to get drawn in.
It will.
It's always going to get drawn in. And you know, whichever side of the fence you stand on this, it is going to be a tricky decision for the FA to make. Whether you think it's right or whether it's wrong, that's what they've decided to do, and it's going to be the same with the Premier League when that continues as well next week.
OK, fair enough. I'll say fair enough. I think it's a bit lacking in competition.
I think that's it. They're fearful.
They are fearful. They won't admit to that, Anne, but I think that's right. I do. I think they're scared of making the wrong decision, and therefore, if we just say it's for innocent victims, we can say that, but then we can't get drawn in accused of anything. And so that's where we are.
Can we just have a quick look at Wayne Rooney, who has now been anointed?
He has been anointed as the Birmingham manager. Now, I was talking about John Eustace just the other day. He was the former manager of Birmingham City.
He did quite well, didn't he?
He was doing well. He was doing very well, but it doesn't fit in with the Hollywood, the excitement, Americans coming in with the big money and saying that, you know, we want to... They actually said, the owners were saying that John, what he saw for the future didn't agree with them. Whereas, obviously, they want them to say, I'm going to win the Premier League. That's what I'm going to do. And he was probably more realistic about the situation. So he's gone. Wayne is in. Big name. It's going to work in the States. It's a global name. But whether he's going to work as a manager or whether it's going to work for him, we don't know. But he's never going to get a better chance.
Has he ever been a manager anywhere else?
Yeah, he has. He's just come back from...
Yeah.
He's just come back from Washington, D.C., where he went over there. Didn't work great. Derby, it didn't work very well either, but he didn't have the backing. He had problems with points deductions, etc., etc. So this is the first time he's gone in. So you've got what you want. There's no excuses. Now it has to work. So it'll be interesting to see whether it will. But he expects to go to the Premier League. But we'll see. Sleeping giant, Birmingham City.
Oh, well, there you go. Look, we'll catch up with the next hour.
Lots to go through.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Coming up for you, what furry animal has returned to West London after 400 years? Well, we can see it. What is it? A beaver?
It's a beaver.
It's a dog.
Flat tail.
Oh, there you go. Anyway, we'll find out more in Headline Makers. That's next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
"7:44, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, or me and her, as we like to call it.
Yeah.
Let's go through the headlines today. Our headline makers this morning: Deputy Political Editor of the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikalova, and Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. It's deputies all round this morning. Good to see you both.
Don't rub it in.
No, you'll be there, you'll get there, you'll depose
yeah, your time will
them.
come.
If you combined us, you'd have a full editor.
Freddie, let's have a look at Bernie Ecclestone. Pulled a fast one.
Yes, I mean, 92-year-old Bernie Ecclestone, billionaire, has not been entirely straight about his taxes, surprise, surprise. And he's had to pay 650 million. He's pleaded guilty to a fraud of about 400 million. This was to do with some money that he did not declare that he was holding in Singapore. And he settled in court. 650 million, he's pleaded guilty to fraud. So he's accepted that he's committed fraud. So he's now a fraudster.
Why would you commit fraud when you've got that much money?
Maybe that's how you make that much money.
Yes.
Maybe.
I suspect he's, and what he says is that it's because of his support for Vladimir Putin that the British government has suddenly started to pursue him.
Are we supporting Vladimir Putin?
Well, it was the beginning of the war. Yeah, there was a bit of he made some vaguely pro-Putin statements. But he then went to Borough Market and bought a donut, which is with a viral image of yesterday. I don't know if you guys have got that.
I don't know.
Have we? No, we don't have it.
No.
But that's the big news, is that he went to Borough Market and bought a donut.
He went...
Oh, there he is.
That's how you celebrate pleading guilty to fraud. You buy a donut. And a reporter confronted him, asked him if he'd talk about it, and he said no, he can't because of his lawyers.
His bloody lawyers, I think that quote was.
His bloody lawyers, yeah, and he shoved the donut in his mouth as he refused to answer the question.
I tell you what annoys me. Look, I'm not against people making money at all. Not at all. I think if you've got the nous and the knowledge, and I like to see people making money. But you've got to, with that comes a responsibility of paying your way.
Absolutely, but also look at it differently. Cost of living crisis, no money in the Treasury. Thank God for Bernie Ecclestone.
Well,
600 million in the bank. Half of it is from just a fine, so...
We can all celebrate now.
We can all, service our debt for about 3 days.
Yeah.
Well, look, at least it'll do something.
Well, quite. Yeah.
At least it'll do something. We've got this video of the Grinch. Let's have a look at this. The Grinch broke ULEZ. Mind you, I don't suppose many people would call them a Grinch if they live in London. Let's have a look. There he is. What's this all about, Anna?
Well, so this is the latest in people damaging ULEZ cameras, which is obviously a criminal offence, to be clear. But this gentleman is taking a lighthearted approach to it, dressing up as the Grinch.
And blocking it with a bit of paper. Mind you, did he get arrested, do we know? Because there must be people in that van, if that's a portable van.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure he got arrested, but this is happening all over
The mugshot would be interesting.
Yes, yes.
There's quite a Christmas theme to this morning's breakfast.
There is, doesn't it?
Aren't we going a bit quick on the
We are.
seasonal...
It is only October.
It is only October. Although it does seem to start around now, actually.
OK, well, you tell us then, Freddie, about Rishi Sunak and his U-turns.
Well, as probably everybody knows by now, Rishi Sunak, U-turn might be putting it a bit strongly, came up with a new path to net zero, which did involve cutting back on some commitments that the government had made, and of course got a lot of criticism for this, and now he's being criticised by the Climate Change Committee, which has said that it will make net zero considerably harder to achieve, and that it will raise bills.
How will it raise bills?
Well, they're not actually quite clear on that.
Well, that would be a key issue.
Because I'd have thought, actually, it would lower bills, and it would certainly lower costs if you don't have to replace your boiler.
Well, that was the whole point.
Or your car.
I mean, that's why he says he still wants to keep to net zero. He still wants to get there by 2050, but he wants to get there in a different way to save all some money.
Well, yes, I think what's interesting about this story is actually nobody knows the sums. Everybody says, oh, we'll get there, the Tories say, oh, we'll get there anyway, through carbon capture and so on. And then the people who oppose the Tories say, no, well, they won't get there. But no one can say precisely when we will reach net zero emissions, because it's abstract. It's an abstract question in many ways.
What do you reckon, Anna?
Well, I mean, I think so. To go into the detail of this, they're saying that tenants would have saved £300 a year because of energy efficiency rules that should have come in for landlords, which is just a completely backward way of looking at it, because they're saying, well, landlords wouldn't have been forced to introduce lots of very costly measures to make their homes more energy efficient. Therefore, tenants would have saved money through the energy efficiency measures, but they're completely ignoring the fact that landlords would have had to spend thousands on these measures, probably passed those on, or just got out of the market, as they have been anyway, and then there have been fewer flats and properties for rent, and then that would have pushed up rents more. So it's just one side of the story.
It makes no sense. If you're going to have to buy completely new windows or whatever, you're going to pass that on to your tenants, aren't you? You just are.
Yes.
So, no, crackers, doesn't make any sense. How we go to that, from that to beavers in West London, Anna, being a family of 5 being reintroduced.
Yes, so this is a rewilding story. Beavers have been reintroduced to West London to improve the biodiversity. And it's the first time beavers have been reintroduced in this way, apparently. They're now in the wetlands in Ealing.
All right.
It's all rather cute, I
think it's lovely,
It is,
actually.
it's beautiful.
One of those things, I mean, they used to be everywhere, beavers, didn't they?
Beavers are back. Well, we nearly killed them, didn't we?
We did,
killed them
yes.
for their oil, that oil that they keep under their tail, colostrum oil, is it?
They've been rewilded in places like Cornwall and various other places, but I'd never really thought of them belonging in West London somehow.
No.
But they do a lot of good, don't they, beavers? I mean, they build dams, we know that, but they sort of protect the watercourses because of that.
Oh, I think that's quite nice, actually. All these little things. It'd be nice if we were a bit more, had a bit more biodiversity in the country.
It's lovely to see.
You two don't sound too enthused by this, I have to say.
Sorry, what do you want me to say? Beavers are going to help plug the productivity gap because they're very industrious.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
God, miserable pair.
They're Eurasian. They're Eurasian beavers, these particular ones.
Are they?
Yeah, they're obviously, from somewhere, other than West London.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. Well, seeing as you're not bothered about beavers, Freddie, how about doing a bit of yoga or meditation?
Well, yes. What do you find? What do you guys find eases your mind? Because there's a survey in the Mail.
Yes.
Sleeping does ease the mind, doesn't it?
Sleeping's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, with your job, you probably don't get very much of it.
Well, not the right time. No.
Household chores like sweeping, hanging out the washing and ironing can be more relaxing than meditation or yoga.
What a load of nonsense.
I know somebody who loves ironing. I can't understand it.
I start from a low bar because I don't find yoga or meditation relaxing at all.
No.
So
well, I've never done it.
It's more relaxing than that. But making a cup of tea is 49% of surveyed 2,000 British people surveyed said that making a cup of tea or coffee relaxes them.
Why would that relax you? It only takes 2 minutes.
My favourite is people get relaxed by grating cheese, apparently.
No.
Mashing potatoes.
No.
One I found something, walking around a supermarket.
Yeah, I find that
20%.
relaxing.
Really?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah. No?
No.
Just browsing.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Painting walls, no.
Making the bed. Oh, this is the worst one. Building flat pack furniture.
Yeah, that's
that's horrific.
Soul destroying.
It's only
It's
people who are
soul-destroying.
highly competent.
You always end up with a sore wrist and 3 screws left over.
Absolutely, you do, yes. And then the thing falls to bits anyway.
Cleaning a tiled floor, mopping the floor I can sort of get.
Really?
To an extent, yeah.
That says as someone who doesn't have to mop floors very often.
Shining your shoes. Who does that anymore?
Shining shoes?
I don't do it enough.
Do you shine your
I shined shoes only the other day.
trainers on? You can't shine them.
No, they weren't my shoes.
It's
different when you're shining them for somebody else, I think, because you're you're sending, in my case, the husband out the door, going, "Oh, I've done your shoes," and they look all lovely and clean.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
No, I think sleeping's...
Knitting,
14%.
Yes, I know people
I'm surprised.
who knit because you can switch off.
I'd sort of quite like to knit. Because like it was so industrious. My grandma used to make all of our clothes when we were little. Everything was knitted. And I sort of think, what a great skill that must be. But I can't knit. But I sort of like the idea of it.
Tidying your garage.
Oh.
I can see that you'd feel a sense of accomplishment at the end of it, but actually doing the tidying, no.
I don't have a garage. I'd quite like one. What about sorting the recycling?
No,
that's stressful.
I don't think that's very relaxing.
No. Oh, this is grim. Who's done this survey?
Well, it's 2,000 Brits. It's on the Mail online.
It's sort of driving, sort of.
You like driving?
I like driving.
Yeah, I don't at all anymore. I used to.
Vacuuming, 25% if I'm vacuuming.
Well, actually, I think most of these, having watched the David Beckham documentary, apply to David Beckham. So maybe he's the one, because that's what came out of that. He loves tidying. He relaxes by cleaning. He also likes driving around.
Oh, well.
I think that's...
Good on him. Let's get him all round to our houses and they can do all the work. Lovely stuff. Thank you both. We'll catch you a little bit later on. Let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather update on this wet and windy Friday. We do have some colder weather to come this weekend, but for the time being, it's a wet and windy picture across the bulk of the UK. Heavy rain across many parts of England and Wales. The highest rainfall totals likely to be building up over the Welsh mountains, but for many, it's a wet picture. And in the south, we could see some heavy thundery downpours developing as we go through the afternoon. Brighter further north, but blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A chilly feel here, milder towards the south with highs of around 21 or 22 Celsius. Some further heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across the south-southeast, but that rain does clear away as we go through the night. And then we have quite a few places seeing clear skies overnight. Some showers, though, piling down on a cold northerly wind, so particularly around Irish Sea coastal areas and towards the north of Scotland. But with clear skies, many places are going to wake up on Saturday morning to a chilly start, a touch of frost, especially in the north, but then it should be a mostly bright morning. We are going to see showers continuing to pile down on that northerly wind, and they are going to become more widespread as we go into the afternoon. Across Scotland, some of those showers could be wintry over the higher ground, so some sleet or snow possible here, and it's going to be a cold day. Temperatures markedly down compared to where they were last weekend, getting to highs of just 14 or 15 Celsius.
Well, there's lots of grim news around today, but of course it's something that we've got to cover. We'll be bringing you the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock in Israel and Gaza, and over 1 million Gazan residents are ordered to flee southward in just 24 hours by Israel. Charities on the ground say the request is impossible. The UN says it can't be done without devastating consequences. Well, as Benjamin Netanyahu swears in his new war cabinet, the UN says the situation is dire as the death toll reaches 2,700 people on both sides. Good morning, 8 o'clock on Friday, the 13th of October.
Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, dropping 6,000 bombs on Hamas targets over the past 6 days, killing over 1,400 people.
Human Rights Watch accuses Israel of using the controversial white phosphorus munition, but the IDF says it's not aware of its use.
The Israeli Prime Minister warns of difficult days ahead as he swears in his new war cabinet. The country's top general admits that the military has failed to protect its citizens. Our reporter Charlie Peters is in Tel Aviv.
The first Gazans begin to flee from the north of Gaza as Israel issues that evacuation order.
Earlier this morning, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told Breakfast that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs and leaflets will help civilians in Gaza to flee.
What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area.
Well, the UK Prime Minister will be in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European Defence Cooperation. But of course, it's overshadowed now by the conflict elsewhere, with the news that British ships and planes will be sent to the Eastern Mediterranean.
An inquest has concluded the death of a transgender woman who committed suicide while waiting for surgery on the NHS. We'll bring you more details ahead of the coroner's verdict today.
And of course, Alex has your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. It's going to turn colder for this weekend, but before then, we have a wet and windy day today. I'll have more in a second.
And of course, we've got the sport with Paul.
We do. We've got Rugby World Cup weekend. It's the quarterfinals happening on Saturday and Sunday. Joining us a little bit later, our greatest ever coach, 2003 World Cup winner, the legendary Sir Clive Woodward.
I look forward to that. Thank you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip need to relocate to the south within the next 24 hours.
And the United Nations says this would mean over 1 million people having to flee, saying that it's impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
Well, as this latest escalation of the decades-long conflict is now entering its 7th day, the death toll on the Israeli side has risen to 1,300. On the Gaza side, 1,400. The UN says food and water are fast running out in Gaza, and 50,000 pregnant women are unable to access essential services.
As Israel reels from the human devastation inflicted on it by Hamas terrorists and its allies rally around it in a show of support, Israeli ground forces gather around Gaza as a likely ground invasion looms.
Well, meanwhile, on a slightly different tangent, the World Trade Organization is warning that if conflict spreads around the region, it's going to have a hugely negative impact on an already weak global trade flow.
There's uncertainty about whether this is going to spread further to the whole region, which could impact very much on global economic growth. There's uncertainty as to when it will end. It is most unfortunate.
Well, in the last few minutes, well, the last hour, I should say, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told Breakfast that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs and leaflets will help civilians to flee.
Israel has, I think, an absolute right and, in fact, a duty, given what's going on, to go after those terrorists. Those terrorists, of course, are using human beings as human shields and hiding behind them, hiding in their homes. What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area and provide that opportunity for people to get out.
Well, let's talk to our reporter Charlie Peters, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. I mean, it looks pretty certain then, does it, with this evacuation order and troops massing on the border, that a ground invasion is imminent?
It is a significant indicator and warning that the Israeli Defence Forces will continue to shape the ground around the Gaza Strip and in the Gaza Strip to prepare for that likely invasion in the coming days. In the last 30 minutes, though, a Hamas official urged Gazans to ignore this evacuation order. They described it as fake propaganda. A few hours before that, the UN also urged Israel to rescind the order. So lots of pushback against this call from the IDF liaison officers with the UN. But it appears that Gazans have not listened to Hamas and ignored the urges from the UN to rescind this call, and they are fleeing. Photos released in the last half hour from Gaza do show civilians heading south out of North Gaza, carrying their clothes and personal belongings, all their basics, in bin bags, in suitcases, in whatever they can get their hands on. I've seen one photo of a small boy carrying a mattress on his back as they try and get out of that location and head south. 1.1 million people heading south towards the bottom of the strip, where they are hoping a humanitarian crossing might be opened with Egypt. There are just two main supply roads in the Gaza Strip, one near the coast, one more centrally. Their situation and their status isn't known, but getting that many people in that distance in just 24 hours is a near impossible task. But Gazans have to try, because they know that Hamas will be using civilians as human shields, and that the IDF is very keen to launch that ground incursion. But before they do that, they need to shape the ground. They need to soften up the targets. They need to hit Hamas military capabilities with their airstrikes. And once they know that civilians have moved out of the area, or as many as possible, we could also see the Israeli Air Force use more serious munitions. We know that 3 days ago, the US provided some advanced munitions to southern Israel, and we're not sure what that could include. But we do know that the Israeli Air Force likes to use what it calls bunker buster munitions. There are so many shelters and tunnels underneath Gaza where Hamas terrorists hide and prepare attacks and prepare to launch rockets, These bunker busters, they use one small charge to open the ground and another to burrow into the shelters and then explode. With fewer civilians in the area, more serious munitions can head into the Gaza Strip.
It's almost impossible to try and understand how that many people could evacuate. I mean, as you were telling us earlier, that already Gaza is probably the most densely populated part of the world, isn't it? And to actually think of 1.1 million people uprooting themselves and all their belongings and moving south, you can't see it happening, really, can you?
Well, I think they're going to have to just try, because the alternative is being caught in this horrifying bombing campaign, which is already following this very, very tense blockade, with electricity supplies running low, water supplies being cut off, fuel for generators, which is sustaining hospitals and schools and other places of humanitarian shelter, also running low. I think many people are just going to walk it. They're going to have to give it a go, because the choice between staying behind and getting caught in this appalling crossfire is just nowhere even close to being a possibility. The attempt will have to be made, and so far we are already seeing people attempting to make that move. But we do know that Hamas terrorists will try and limit that movement. They may try and sort of seize an opportunity to prevent civilians from moving south. That could include a use of force, because we do know it is within Hamas tactics and procedures to use civilian areas to protect themselves. They embed themselves within the civilian population. This makes it harder for the Israeli forces to launch back at the point of origin of any rocket attacks, but also harder for them to target more static Hamas military capabilities, such as air defense assets and gathering points of ammunition, and also key leadership personnel. When Israel flattens entire residential areas, they do so because they believe those residential areas are full of Hamas terrorists and capabilities and weapons. This is what is almost certainly going to continue to happen in the next 48 hours.
Just a word, Charlie, on what Human Rights Watch are saying. They've accused Israel of using white phosphorus. Now, we know that is hugely controversial. The IDF sort of denying that at the moment, but that would be crossing a line, wouldn't it?
That would be a grave breach of international law. And of course, this comes in the last 6 days with many concerns expressed towards how Israel is maintaining this blockade in the southern area of their territory into the Gaza Strip, but also on that border crossing with Egypt. We heard reports 4 days ago as they started to gear up and react to the appalling atrocities committed by thousands of terrorists in southern Israel. We heard the reports that the IDF would and could strike logistical and humanitarian supplies coming into the Gaza Strip from the south. The IDF reports there saying that they would strike any fuel trucks, that any attempts to bring in supplies into the south. They were very keen to maintain the strictest possible blockade as they could. So people are sheltering wherever they can in Gaza. That often includes hospitals and schools that are not targeted by the IDF for obvious reasons. That would be an appalling breach of international human rights. But yes, reports of more extreme munitions coming in, and I do suspect that we will see those bunker buster munitions being used after this evacuation period ends, because they need to clear those shelters. If there is going to be a ground invasion, it's very difficult to move heavy armour and infantry units into a place where the enemy could spring up at any moment beneath them. They need to clear those underground tunnels as much as they possibly can.
Okay, Charlie, for now, thanks very much.
Sounds terrifying, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But what can you do? I mean, it's moving in, as our guest said earlier on, anyone who's in the armed forces will know, or has been in the armed forces, will know the idea of moving into such a built-up area is absolutely wrought with danger. But, you know, that's what they're there to do. They're going to try and soften it up, as they say beforehand. What will be left afterwards for the people of Gaza to move back to? There is talk of them trying to then move people back to the north and clear them from the south and work in that area. There's not going to be much to go back to.
Over 1 million people having to just up sticks and become refugees suddenly and just walk to hopefully a place of safety. One commentator says it's impossible for 1.1 million people to leave their homes within 24 hours. That would involve 40,000 people per hour.
I mean, it's
unsustainable, isn't it?
And if you look at it in one sense, it looks horrifically cruel. However, Hamas must have known what the response was going to be. They've crossed the border into Israel and massacred innocents. So what do you expect Israel to do in response to that? These are Israeli troops in southern Israel this morning, sort of amassing on the border, the tanks out in force, as you can see. They're not messing about.
No, they're not.
And of course, the argument is, why should they, in the face of what they've dealt with, the greatest number of Israeli civilian casualties that they've seen in this conflict over decades, and they're going to respond, and they're responding hard.
It's like watching war unfold live on television, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's really frightening.
Well, back here in the UK, members of Britain's Jewish community are going to be given more protection against anti-Semitic attacks as the conflict is enflaming community tensions. The Prime Minister announced he's determined to do more.
The Community Security Trust, an organisation established to provide security for British Jews, has reported 139 anti-Semitic incidents in the last 4 days and will be given £3 million now to help protect that community.
Lisa Hartle has been talking with the community in North London. She's in Golders Green for us this morning. Lisa, what are they telling you?
So Golders Green has a large Jewish community here in North London, and throughout the week I've been speaking to various members of the Jewish community, and they've all said the same thing, that they're heartbroken and distraught over the conflict, but they're also concerned about what the implications can be for them back here in the UK. And as we heard, like you said there, yesterday the government announced that £3 million to that charity organisation, CST. They provide security for Jewish schools, synagogues, and they've reported that they've seen just this week alone a rise of 324% in reports of anti-Semitism. And we've heard reports as well that today there are 3 schools in North London, Jewish schools, that have decided to close for today over security concerns. And that comes after a former leader of Hamas and called for protests around the world. And we're going to hear now from 2 women that I spoke to this week about how they're feeling about the situation in the UK.
Grandchildren are now going to nurseries with guards with guns, you know, security guards here in London to be protected. And also I have family in Israel, and they're all absolutely devastated. It's just beyond words, and I just feel sorry for all the innocents, the Gazan people and the Israelis.
Everybody has got their heart in their mouths and is in a state of very high anxiety and fear. I've got a friend I go out and have restaurant meals with and share birthday celebrations. She wants to take every single one of her 5 grandchildren out of their schools and homeschool them because she thinks they're in danger if they're in their Jewish schools.
We've also heard reports this week of some Jewish schools telling parents that if their children on the way to school, if they want to cover up the symbol of the school on their blazers or disguise where it is they're going to school over safety concerns. And earlier this week I spoke to the CEO of that security charity, Mark Gardner, and he told me that if a non-Jewish person went into a Jewish school, they would be shocked at the levels of security they already have in place. They build schools where they can away from roads to avoid any car bomb possibilities. They have protective screenings over windows, they have infrared technology and 24-hour CCTV that feeds into their central hub. They have security guards, but he said on top of all that, with the rise in anti-Semitism, they're now going to place more security guards in schools. There'll be a higher police presence, just doing whatever they can to ensure that the Jewish community and especially Jewish children are as safe as can be.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, terrible situation when ordinary people have to be so worried about a war that's happening halfway across the world, and it's still hitting us in our own country too.
Yeah, it's absolutely not right. Well, meanwhile, amidst all of this, the PM is joining Northern European leaders at a summit in Sweden later on today, which was meant to be about sort of security protocols across Northern Europe. Instead, of course, Israel and Gaza are pretty much going to top the agenda.
Yeah, the meeting of the UK-led defence grouping had been expected to see leaders focus on the threat from Russia, as the war in Ukraine, of course, heads into another winter.
Yeah, but the attack over the weekend has pushed the Middle East to the top of the agenda.
And this comes as the Prime Minister has already confirmed the UK will send Royal Navy vessels and a surveillance aircraft to the Eastern Mediterranean to support Israel.
Yeah, all about stopping supplies, munitions, really, weapons getting into Gaza and sort of resupplying Hamas. And we know that it is often the aid corridors which are being used to smuggle money and weapons in to Hamas, which is why they're not being opened at the moment, despite the UN saying they do need to be open, because there's a desperate need for that aid, water, fuel, food and medical aid to get in. I mean, it's essential, but it's also used to smuggle other stuff in, which is the concern. So you can understand Israel's position on clamping down on that, but of course the impact it has is on the innocent people in Gaza.
Yes, it's grim news today, but we've got lots to talk about on the programme. Coming up, we're going to be talking about England taking on Fiji this weekend in the Rugby World Cup. That's, of course, all with the sport, and Paul Coit, who'll be with us in a few minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hello again, it's 23 minutes past 8. Now, an inquest into the death of a transgender woman who killed herself whilst on an NHS waiting list has concluded, and a verdict is due today. Alice Littman from Brighton had waited nearly 3 years for gender-affirming healthcare before sadly taking her own life in May last year.
Well, her mother told the inquest that Alice had not been offered the care which could have saved her. Well, let's talk to diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Went, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Look, this is... Let's be quite honest, because this is a controversial issue, and I have to say, particularly for a lot of our viewers and listeners. So let's handle this in the right way, because there are a lot of people out there who don't understand what difference it makes, what an issue it is for someone who is transgender awaiting this sort of care, this sort of surgery on the NHS. Clearly, the pressure is immense.
Absolutely, and I'm very much definitely an older person rather than a young teen, but I waited nearly 8 years, and it made an immeasurable difference to my life afterwards. It removed the gender dysphoria that I had. So for me, it was a success story. It improved my mental well-being. But the problem is, I think it's not even the actual... There's two problems here. One is how long it takes to even be seen a first appointment. In Alice's case, they'd already been seen. She'd been seen, I think, from the age of 17 or something for anxiety and for suicidal ideation and for suicidal action already. And then the trans thing was on top of that. And the transition from age 18 to 19 takes you out of child and adolescent mental health services and into kind of adult mental health services. And it is well known that there is a kind of a gap in the handover of care there. My ex-wife is a psychiatrist, so I'm fairly familiar with what I heard about this problem of transferring people who are teens into young adult mental health care. But the problem is not only this 3-year wait in Alice's case to be seen, it's the fact that in that 3-year wait, there is no real additional support. If you're waiting 3 years for a mental health condition, gender dysphoria, then you should be being seen regularly by hopefully an NHS-funded therapist, because that's what will actually help you get through the wait before you even get that initial assessment. The difference between physical and mental health is that physical health is allegedly guaranteed an 18-week maximum wait time. You know, whether it's trans or whether it's simply the umbrella term of mental health, which Alice had additional things going on with as well, we should not be waiting 3 years for appointments or 18 months to see a therapist.
Why is the waiting time so long?
Well, the waiting time is long in mental health in general. Wellbeing and therapeutic services are severely underfunded. Then it's doubled again if you're trans, because then you're looking for a highly specialised area. This isn't even the wait to see the surgeons. This is the wait to see the psychologists, to see the psychiatrists, to see the psychotherapists within the NHS gender identity services. And obviously, because there's been these investigations and the complete change of services around the Tavistock and Portman and things like that, and the former Charing Cross Clinic, there's a restructuring going on, which is making it worse at the moment anyway. They were already considering rolling out more, but then we've had this sex-gender culture war that has actually kind of put a temporary delay on it, and nobody wants to get behind this. What they should really be doing is backing increased youth and young adult mental health services and having kind of gender identity included within that, so that people can access it rather than have to go to 3 or 4 specialist clinics around the country that can be hours away and years away.
What is... I mean, I can't quite understand how people cope with what is going on, because there is, you talked about the sort of gender-sex culture war, and there is, as a result of that, and more of an anti-trans sentiment growing in the UK. which, I mean, I have to say, I think is driven by a total lack of understanding, isn't it, about what people are what trans people actually go through. And how do you begin to even tackle that? I mean, I know it's a much bigger issue, but the sort of lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding and a lack of sympathy, actually, is problematic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you handle it by handling two things separately. One is the kind of the sex, gender, ideology, biology versus identity discussions. Have them, and I engage in them all of the time, but I never get personal. That's one. So you tackle the subject, you attack the idea, you pull it apart, you question the procedures, the policies, what this is doing. Absolutely do that. But you don't launch into a hate campaign. You don't launch into a dehumanization campaign. We can see what dehumanization is doing in the Middle East right now. But with the sex and gender, both sides are kind of dehumanizing each other. I do have great people I engage with on the gender critical side who actually say, look, I have no problem with trans people living their lives, but I question this around youth or around ideology or around it being too fast. So questions are acceptable, but we must continue to humanize this and discover the empathy around another person's struggle. Surely we can have at least that at a personal level to say, I'm not happy that you're going through this. And on the subject of this person's actual suicide, I have a suicide history in my own past and actually in my recent past. And I actually got a lot of empathy from gender critical people who messaged me saying, I'm so sorry, Katie, you're going through this. That sucks. And my suicides were nothing to do with being trans. But it is interesting that people can step out of the battle and find the human in a conversation. And I think in this case, we need to find the human. And at an individual basis, someone seeking help, we have to be on the side of getting them help and getting them help quickly, getting them qualified help, getting them open-minded help. And I think we can all back that. When we start talking about, is there an ideological campaign going on here? Then yes, we can pull that apart. But let's keep that separate from the individuals who are suffering and are at a high risk of suicide. I know the figures are debated as to whether it's X percent or that percent, and we can pick apart and find different reports that say different numbers. But even the NHS speaks of a figure of around 30% of trans people attempt to take their lives, which is higher than the average. But there are also comorbidities for those with mental health understanding, recognizing that around a quarter of trans people are neurodiverse as well. A large number of trans people have additional mental health things going on, and they should be treated alongside being trans. Being trans and curing being trans through transition should not be seen as a panacea to kind of curing all the additional mental health things that were going on in that person as well. I've known people who've taken their lives after transition because everyone assumed, oh, right, your depression is gone now. And it hadn't.
Look, you make some really interesting points. I wish we had longer, but sadly we don't this morning. But Katie, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Gosh.
Humanity.
Yes,
that was the key message. Let's just
back to that, isn't it?
show some humanity to each other, which isn't, as Katie pointed out, is not happening elsewhere in the world at the moment.
But coming up, is the BBC right not to call Hamas a terrorist organisation? We're going to be discussing that and a lot more in Headline Makers coming up next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It is 8:35. Good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And joining us to go through some of the day's headlines then is Deputy Political Editor of the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikulova, and Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Deputies all, as we said earlier. Right, Anna, tell us about these people who are tearing down the posters.
So this is a video that went viral yesterday of someone in London tearing down posters of people, but specifically, I think in this case, children kidnapped by Hamas and taken into Gaza. So if you look...
I mean, why would
you do that?
Why would you do that?
They are challenged by the person filming, and they specifically say, because of what about the Palestinian children? Which is just... I mean, it's completely grim that someone would go around taking down, specifically targeting the worst, an example of the worst excesses of the attacks from the weekend, but it does also show the absolutely, difficult nature of this conflict, and there's so much... The most difficult part of resolving conflicts like this is there is so much emotion and hurt on both sides that runs so deep.
And it shows that, Hamas's cynical game of framing this as a sort of holy war, an Islamic war. Those were two Muslim women, you can tell by the hijabs. There's a lot of people in London. We have a diaspora in London. We have a large Muslim diaspora, and we have to confront the fact there's a lot of people in Britain, part of Muslim communities in Britain, who side very, very strongly with Palestine. And they're going to think of this war in the same way that Hamas do, as a holy war on behalf of Palestine, on behalf of Muslim people. Hamas are now calling for a global jihad. And, we have to think about the fact a lot of people in Britain and in other countries, Western countries, are going to respond to that.
Which is hugely difficult. I do know, I did come across someone who was telling me, only yesterday, actually, that there are some people they know, who Muslims that they know, saying they don't... Well, it isn't happening.
Yeah.
The attack at the weekend didn't happen.
It's all lies.
It's just lies on the news.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get the facts and to make this. I mean, as we saw with what happened with Russia, and Boris Johnson was very clearly saying, you know, we're not against the Russian people, we're against what the Russian government has done. It's the same with this, isn't it? It's about saying certainly not against Muslims, we're not against the Palestinian people, but but you cannot stand for what Hamas as a terrorist organisation, a terrorist government has done.
Yes.
And it's trying to get that differential in, isn't it? Which is hugely difficult.
Well, that takes us to our next story, actually.
Well, language
is so important. And this is the story about a Jewish BBC sports reporter who's resigned from his job because of the language the BBC insists on using.
Yes, a 22-year-old man, Noah Abrahams, who was a BBC sports reporter, and he posted a tweet saying that he will be covering no more games, and the reason is he thinks that the BBC is refusing to use the word terrorist to describe Hamas is unjustified. And a lot of people agree with him. I mean, Hamas is prescribed as a terrorist group officially. By the UK government. Yes, and what else do you call attacking a festival, a music festival, and killing so many young people?
The BBC's argument, of course, is that it has to maintain a degree of impartiality and, as a result, we would refer to them as militants, and has always done that. And they also claim that Sky and ITV do the same. Now, I have to say, I've not watched other people's coverage, so I don't know what anyone else is doing. But I'm trying to think back to my days on Sky, and I don't know if we would refer to how we did it back then.
I have some sympathy for that argument. The problem is the BBC aren't actually that consistent. They do use the word terrorist, and they have done.
Also, the frustrating thing here is, you know, as journalists, we're not meant to become the story. And by doing this and sticking to it, and then BBC reporters going out and justifying it, this becomes a story. It detracts from the actual coverage, which some of the BBC coverage has been outstanding. You know, they've got reporters on the ground in Gaza, they've got reporters on the ground in Jerusalem, these people who are risking their lives covering this war. And all of this talk about, well, whether or not they should use the word terrorist just detracts from it. It becomes a sideshow.
And particularly BBC gets hung up a little bit on Middle Eastern things. They used to say the holy city of Fallujah. Do you remember that? There was no need to say the holy city of Fallujah. You know, we're not obliged to do that. I think it is a difficult area. Language is a difficult thing. Particularly the word terrorist, should be used appropriately.
Absolutely.
But I think this is an entirely appropriate time to use it.
Well, when you see what has happened and what happened on Saturday, what else would you call it? Frankly.
Well, and calling them militants, I think, also suggests that there's a sort of non-militant wing, which, you know, some people say there is of Hamas, but I think it's quite hard to see them as anything more than...
But the strength of feeling. I mean, we just saw that video of the women there taking down the posters.
Yeah.
Here we've got a young BBC sports reporter who's literally resigned because of that.
Yes.
It's the strength of feeling on all sides.
Yes. Well, I mean, he clearly, you know, he's given up a very good job at the BBC. He may be offered a job as a result of this, but...
There's his tweet, actually. He said, a personal announcement from me. I will no longer work for or represent the BBC.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you see... And I have to say, what puts it into a bit more context for me is the fact that His Majesty the King and His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales have both, over the last 24 hours, referred to these terrorist attacks. Now, if the royal family are doing it, why can't the BBC?
Well, quite. And King Charles is actually known, you know, the Muslim world celebrated King Charles because he's known to be an Islamophile. And I think in a way, you know, identifying them as terrorists helps to distinguish them from this sort of, you know, global jihad idea that Hamas are trying to create.
That's a terrible...
It also helps distinguish them from the many, many Palestinians who do not support them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you've got to... And that's a really, as I was saying before, that's a really important distinction. Anyway, look, let's move away from all of that, should we, to something which is totally different, but actually relevant today, because it is Friday the 13th, and the Mirror is saying it is unlucky for some, play on words.
Unlucky for some, but lucky for others. So the number 13, buying a house or a flat that has the number 13, apparently will get you a discount. So Rightmove have done a survey of all properties on the market and says that something that's got the number 13 in it is typically £5,000 cheaper. So if that's not a reason to go out and buy it, I don't know what is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would take a house. I'd take £5,000 for having number 13 on the door.
Wouldn't occur to
I'm
me.
not really superstitious.
No, I'm not superstitious like that. It wouldn't occur to me. I remember getting in the lift once, and where on earth it was, somewhere in the UK, and they had all the floors, no floor 13.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of hotels don't have a number 13
right,
floor.
It is Friday the 13th today, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Did that worry you this one? It didn't occur to me, I have to say.
Look what happened to Apollo 13.
Oh. Yeah.
NASA was so adamant that we are a scientific organisation. We will therefore go ahead and call it Apollo 13.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to upset people. Here you go. I'll be back. I will be back. Because I'm so not superstitious.
Oh, I see.
Here we go. This is because it was raining this morning.
No, don't do that.
Sorry.
Oh, no.
There you go.
We're going to be cursed as a result.
An umbrella up inside my brain's not working.
I don't think you should have done that.
What, do you not?
No.
I know what it is. It's because I threatened to throw glitter over you earlier, so you're now protecting your
You
garden.
see, I'm so unsuperstitious. There you go. That'll upset a few of you at home.
That will.
Really will.
The viewers are going to be...
But you see, there you go. I didn't think you were superstitious.
I'm not.
But you
I didn't
are.
think I was. Yeah. Gosh.
It's only an umbrella, isn't it? It's only an umbrella.
Yeah, until you fall over it. Or...
Oh, I don't care. I don't care.
Wait, talking about things like that, the Sycamore Gap tree. Freddie, this is your story.
Well, this everybody saw what happened to Sycamore Gap tree. It was vandalised, sawn down. And what was very odd is how emotional people felt about this story. Everybody felt very upset and outraged by it. And
Stephen, you didn't. You just kept saying it's only a tree.
I do think it's only a tree. I mean, and I'm a big nature lover, and I have a sense of awe when it comes to very old trees and all that stuff. I really, really do. But I think with people getting their knickers in such a twist, I don't think it should have happened. I think it's a disgusting act of vandalism. I really, really do.
Yes.
But it's a tree.
Well, yesterday it was sort of removed properly, and onlookers described it as a funeral. For the tree.
For heaven's sakes. Had you heard of the Sycamore Gap before all this happened?
I had heard of it, yes.
But vaguely?
Vaguely.
Just vaguely?
Only because I'd seen photos of it.
All right, because I'd not heard of it. Had you heard of it?
It is quite iconic, but I hadn't gone there on holiday to take a photo of it.
The majority of people, I know it's just anecdotal, the majority of people I'd spoken to had thought, oh, isn't it beautiful, isn't it lovely? But had they heard of it? No. And the nation's in uproar.
There is good news. However, which is that they think that they will be able to regrow it.
Yeah, it's just going to re-sprout.
Yeah, re-sprout. And it's only planted 130 years ago, so if you live to 70 or 70 more years, you might
It was only planted... I thought it was 400 years old.
I thought
it was 130 years old, which in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things for trees is not that old.
It's not. We were told 400 years originally.
Yes.
So, you see, we've been spun a line.
There we go.
We've been spun a line.
It's been moved. There's just a whacking great hole there now, is there?
No, I think they're going to try and they're going to try and grow it out of the stump.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it'll re-sprout.
Leave it alone. Quite sure how they do it. Maybe some of your viewers can let us know how you make that work.
Don't know. Let's do one more. What should we have? I'll tell you what, Anna. A bit of Deliveroo. What's going on with Deliveroo?
So, a Deliveroo driver has been pictured crucially not driving, but going across the boat in a dinghy.
Oh.
A small paddle boat.
Paddling?
With Suella Braverman, apparently, I hear, closely following behind, trying to arrest him.
Oh, yeah.
Stop it.
Oh, so in the Thames, just going across the Thames. Have we got the video? Let's have a look at the video.
Was he actually doing a Deliveroo?
He was. Well, he's pictured in the jacket.
He seems to be. He may just be...
Oh, it's a... Oh, heck, that's a very tiny little...
He may just be an eccentric pretending to be a Deliveroo driver.
It's like, what do you call those little boats like that? It's not a...
Paddle boat.
It looks like a plastic cup. It looks like a large plastic cup he's paddling.
Yeah.
Well, I think your food would be cold by the time you got there, wouldn't it? Dear me, the things they'll do. I don't get the whole Deliveroo thing. I don't understand it.
I'm trying to think of what that word for a little canoe is. It's a...
I've deleted Deliveroo, even.
Oh, have you? I've never had it. There you go. Anyway, look, it's been good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Great pleasure.
Let's have a look at some of the stories heading into the newsroom at 8:47.
Firefighters in Scotland are to be consulted on strike action over a devastating package of cuts. That's according to the Fire Brigades Union. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service announced they'll need to save a minimum of £14 million next year, which could result in the loss of a further 339 firefighters and 18 fire engines, with more to come.
Online apps have been recommended to help people with lower back pain in a bid to tackle NHS waiting lists. 7 different platforms have been given the green light for people over 16 to manage their condition online. According to the NHS, the long-term plan and lower back pain due to that is the biggest cause of disability and thought to account for 30% of GP consultations every year.
8 new coins inspired by the King's passion for conservation and the natural world have been unveiled by the Royal Mint. The new designs, which will feature on coins ranging from 1p to the £2 coin, will soon start to appear in people's change across the UK. The designs are also inspired by flora and fauna, celebrating creatures like the red squirrel, the hazel dormouse and the bee.
Just my luck that the squirrel is on a 2p. Could have been on a £2. That'd have been nicer. Like a nice heavy coin.
We had one. Do we still have 1p coins?
Yeah. We haven't got the halfpennies anymore.
No.
They've gone, but we've still got 1p's. Not that you see many.
No, you don't, do you?
Paul Coyte is here, talking of cheap pennies.
That's me. I would be on the half-p.
You'd be on the half-p?
I would certainly be on the half-p. There's no question about that.
How you doing? What's happening?
I'm good. I tell you, I'm so excited. It's going to be a great weekend. Great weekend of sport.
Lots of rugby.
Lots of rugby. We have Rugby World Cup quarter-finals. And the greatest moment in English rugby was, of course, 2003, when we lifted the World Cup, so 20 years ago.
I remember that well.
The man behind the whole thing, 7 years England coach, the legendary Sir Clive Woodward, I believe, is in Marseille at the moment. Morning, Clive.
What did you say to him?
He didn't like the look of you, did he?
You know what? It was all about the 2p. He was always a fan of the dormouse, and I don't think the dormouse actually made it to the proper coins.
I'll tell you what. If we ever, I know they're going to try and get him back. It's technology for you. But I mean, it's proper knockout now, isn't it?
It is. Well, this is it. It's always when we have... It's a very long World Cup, so it goes on for a very long time. When we're in the pool stage, that's when there's probably not as much interest amongst those armchair rugby fans than there would be once we get to the knockout, because that's when we know it starts getting very exciting. So there's obviously 4 games. England are going to be playing Fiji. Now, England lost to Fiji in the summer, and England, it's been a very strange World Cup. You know, it was a good start against Argentina, and it was like, well, this is going to be great. This is absolutely going to be terrific. And then it was a little wobble, so we don't really know what we're going to get. Although, I tell you what we are going to get, and hopefully that's a Clive that's with us in Marseille right now. You did worry us for a second, Clive. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's lovely to see you. I was talking about 2003, and I'm sure, I don't know whether you ever get fed up with talking about 2003, because it's 20 years now, but the greatest moment in English rugby. I'd love to know, what was it like for you, that moment, though, that Johnny Wilkinson kicked the drop goal? We see Sir Alf Ramsey from 66 never did a thing, but never do we see the camera on you. What was it like for that moment for you?
Well, I think when the drop goal went over, that wasn't the end of the game. There's still a minute to go. So I think I was actually quite pleased with my reaction, because I'm screaming at the players to get back in position. And to be fair, when they kicked off, we weren't in position. So I was going nuts on the sideline because we weren't in position. But when the final whistle went a minute later, I can honestly say it was just huge relief. I mean, we'd arrived at that game as #1 ranked team in the world, favourites to win, and we kind of left it very, very late. So the relief was huge, because I'm not quite sure how any of us would have turned out, Paul, if we'd not won that game. So it was a fantastic moment, but just kind of a combination of 7 years of hard work and, You know, never forget it. Don't mind talking about it, as you can see. But 20 years later, it's great to see England back in the quarterfinals.
Absolutely. I could keep talking about this for ages. But one more thing, though, when you talk about 2003, you said the word relief, and every sports great that I've spoken to over the years, whether they've been football or athletics or Olympics, it's always more relief than actually jubilation. Was there a moment that you could truly enjoy it, or was it just literally, that's it, we've done it, we can relax now?
Yeah, it was huge relief because, you know, I think if you win big sports matches or big events and you're not the favourites, you can go wild and celebrate, and it's just a euphoria moment. When you are favourites to win it, and we were red hot favourites to win, it is huge relief. And as I said, it only kind of really sunk home, I guess, about a week later when we got home. You know, when we went to Buckingham Palace and 10 Downing Street and see all the crowds in London, that's when I suddenly realised we've done something quite special. But you know, great moments, but you move on. I'm pleased we've all moved on, and hopefully English rugby's moved on to have a successful World Cup this year.
What would a successful World Cup be for England then, you think, Clive, this year?
I think like all things, you've got to go game by game. This next game is a real tough game for them. I mean, this quarterfinal stage, it's been a kind of a good World Cup, but I think everyone's very excited about the quarterfinals. And you've got two heavyweight competitions. You have France, South Africa, New Zealand, Ireland, as you mentioned before. I mean, those games would grace the final. So England play Fiji, Wales play Argentina. So for England, you know, we just got to win this game, and we will be favourites. So yes, as you said in your build-up, we lost a few months ago to Fiji at Twickenham. It wasn't a great game, but I think the team has moved on. It really has moved on. I think Borthwick in the middle of your shot here has done a pretty good job. So I think it would be a big upset if England don't go through to the semi-finals. So a successful World Cup is just winning your next game. So far we're in the quarterfinals. I think Borthwick's doing a good job. Bit of controversy about the team, especially with foul at 10. But it doesn't matter who plays 10. England should win this game. Playing Fiji, they're a good team, but we should actually win this game at the weekend.
I've got to have a quick word on Wales and also Ireland as well, because I'm always going to get told off when I don't mention the Welsh. Do you feel almost like they've flown under the radar a little bit now with Warren Gatland taking over?
Yeah, they have, and they've just, it's interesting, they've got a full-strength side out the weekends. Again, I think Wales will be favourites against Argentina. And I have to say to Gatland, he's done a great job. You know, a lot of his top players have kind of moved on and retired. And it's interesting with those retirement players, you know, it's interesting that you talk about the players, you know, the current players, but retirement is everything. And funny enough, I've been reading a report this morning from the Scottish Widows about retirement of players and how so many of them don't actually get sort of financial regulations put in place. And, you know, it says 78% of people, you know, living currently the generation before better pension schemes than them. So we talk about the current players, but the players moved on. We've got to make sure they're financially in good stead as well. So, but Wales got a great chance. You know, I think Wales will make the semi-finals along with England. And so, you know, it could be an all Northern Hemisphere semi-final lineup with France and obviously Ireland doing very well as well. So we're hoping those are going to be the games and be great for Northern Hemisphere rugby. We get all four of the teams in those semi-final spots.
Very excited. Finally, got to ask you, who wins the World Cup, Sir Clive?
Who wins the World Cup?
Yes.
Well, obviously, I love England to win the World Cup, but they're
I didn't say who would you want to win. I want who's going to win.
Well, I want England to win, but I think who will win? Someone's got to beat France, and I'm not sure anyone's good enough to beat France playing at home. They've got a great team. Dupont coming back, he's got a bad injury, but he's going to play. But the France-New Zealand game is just the France-South Africa game is just massive. I mean, that's a heavyweight clash in anyone's language. So the games this weekend, France, South Africa, New Zealand, Ireland, are just massive for the whole sport. So big weekend of rugby, but I say someone's got to beat France. It's same in 2003. Someone had to beat England and no one could. And someone's got to beat France, and hopefully England will get a shot at them in the semi-finals, which will be a great game for England.
Look forward to it. Sir Clive, enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Great weekend of rugby, quarterfinals underway tomorrow.
Yeah, lovely stuff, isn't it, though? I like the man. He's a man of history, isn't he?
God, absolute legend. Absolute rugby legend.
Much like your good self.
Very much so.
Paul, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got all the very latest from that conflict in the Middle East heading your way very shortly.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Well, it's coming up to 11 o'clock in the Middle East. Over 1 million Gaza residents ordered to flee southward in just 24 hours by Israel. Charities on the ground say that's impossible. The UN says it can't be done without devastating consequences. As Benjamin Netanyahu swears in his new war cabinet, the UN says the situation is dire. The combined death toll reaches 2,700. Well, it is 9 o'clock here in the UK on Friday, the 13th of October, and these are the stories we've been covering on Breakfast so far today.
People in Gaza are caught between Israel telling them to move and Hamas saying don't respond as Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues, dropping 6,000 bombs in 6 days, killing over 1,400 people.
Human Rights Watch accuses Israel of using the controversial munition white phosphorus, but the IDF says it's not aware of its use.
The Israeli Prime Minister warns of difficult days ahead as he swears in his new war cabinet. The country's top general admits that the military has failed to protect its citizens.
Earlier this morning, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told Breakfast that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs will help civilians in Gaza to flee.
What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister will be in Sweden today for a meeting on Northern European defence cooperation. But of course, it's now overshadowed very much by the conflict elsewhere, with the news that British ships and planes will be sent to the eastern Mediterranean.
A coroner due to give their verdict today at the inquest into the death of a transgender woman who took their own life whilst waiting almost 3 years for sex change surgery on the NHS.
And as councils across the land scrap their Christmas lights, markets and trees in order to save money, we debated, is it right for councils to cancel Christmas? If you missed that, you could catch it online, of course, but we want to know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.com.
And as you may have just seen, rugby legend Sir Clive Woodward revealed this morning who he thinks is going to win the Rugby World Cup.
I want England to win, but I think who will win? Someone's got to beat France, and I'm not sure anyone's going to have to beat France playing at home.
And of course, you can find the full interview at gbnews.com. Last but not least, Alex will have your latest weather.
Good morning. It's going to turn colder for this weekend, but before then, we have a wet and windy day today. I'll have more in a second.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
So let's kick straight off with the Middle East, should we? And in the last few hours, the Israeli military has told the United Nations that everyone living in the northern half of the Gaza Strip needs to relocate to the south in the next 24 hours.
The UN says this would mean over 1 million people having to flee, saying that it is impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences.
Well, as the latest escalation of this decade-long conflict enters its 7th day, the death toll on the Israeli side has risen to 1,300. The death toll on the Gazan side, 1,400. The UN says food and water are running out fast in Gaza and 50,000 pregnant women are unable to access essential services.
As Israel reels from the human devastation inflicted on it by Hamas terrorists and its allies rally around it in a show of support, Israeli ground forces gather around Gaza as a likely ground invasion looms.
Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization has warned that if the conflict spreads to the region, it's going to have a huge impact.
There's uncertainty about whether this is going to spread further to the whole region, which could impact very much on global economic growth. There's uncertainty as to when it will end. It is most unfortunate.
Well, earlier on in the programme, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told us that Israel dropping smaller warning bombs and leaflets will help those civilians to flee.
Israel has, I think, an absolute right and, in fact, a duty, given what's going on, to go after those terrorists. Those terrorists, of course, are using human beings as human shields and hiding behind them, hiding in their homes. What Israel is doing is making sure that they drop leaflets. They use the telephone network to warn people. They use what's called knock and drop, where they drop a small munition to provide a warning to leave the area and provide that opportunity for people to get out.
Well, let's get the very latest from Israel. Charlie Peters is in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Charlie.
Yes, this is a significant development, this warning from the IDF calling on civilians in Gaza to move south. They say they have 24 hours to extract themselves from the north of Gaza. Now, many commentators have already said that this is an impossible task. There are just two main supply routes in Gaza, one towards the coast, another more inland, but it's not clear what state those roads are in, and obviously after several nights of heavy bombardment by the Israeli Air Force, there are few logistical options available for civilians on the ground. As the first photos of Gazans fleeing are released this morning, it seems that they are taking whatever opportunity they can to get out. People are going by foot to leave the country, to leave the territory they're in the north. We've seen photos of children carrying their belongings on their backs, women carrying clothes and basic supplies in bin bags even, and small suitcases, just leaving because they know that after 750 targets were struck by the Air Force overnight, more is going to come. This is a warning, I think, not only that more strikes are coming and that a likely ground invasion is on the way, but also that heavier munitions can be used. We do know that the Israeli Air Force likes to target the Hamas militants in their underground shelters and bunkers with so-called bunker buster munitions. These are bombs that have two charges on them. One to create an opening in the ground and another to explode again once it burrows into the dens where terrorists are gathering. Now, of course, significant concerns that these civilians moving south, 1.1 million of them, will be entering an even worse humanitarian situation that they're in now, if they even can conduct that extraction. Because people in the north are sheltering in hospitals and schools, they can't move for many of them, and it's not clear what they will do. An added dimension that I don't think we've really covered so far this morning is that there are so many hostages in Gaza. Will the hostages move with people moving south? It's unclear, and it's probably unlikely, because Hamas have said this morning that they are urging people not to move south. So it's likely that many civilians will also remain, and those hostages will stay with Hamas terrorists in the north.
If Israel has said what it has, is giving people 24 hours to get out, to flee south, what does that then suggest is going to happen next within that 24-hour period?
Well, once the 24 hours are up, I think we will see an even heavier bombardment of that location. Day and night here in central Tel Aviv, we are hearing fighter jets buzzing overhead as they move north to resupply and then move south to strike. There are apparently some 60 jets operating around the clock here to observe, target and destroy areas in the Gaza Strip. And this is an important shaping manoeuvre to prepare the ground for an invasion, because with over 100,000 troops, many of them in heavy armour on that southern border in the Gaza Strip, they need to soften the ground, in military terminology, for them to advance into that location. As we've said, many Hamas militants relying on underground shelters and bunkers, not only to secure themselves, but also to lay traps to any invading forces. It is hard to manoeuvre a tank in one of the most densely populated parts of the world, but it becomes terrifying and fraught with danger if a militant with an RPG can pop up behind you in a shelter at any moment. They need to decimate that capability as much as possible as they move for this invasion. But at the same time, there are some concerns held by IDF commanders here in Israel that the IDF just isn't ready for the invasion just yet. Obviously, Saturday morning's invasion was a huge security and intelligence failure, but as they arm themselves and get ready to move into this offensive poise, they need to set up urgently that logistical supply route. They need to arm 500,000 soldiers. They need to activate 360,000 reservists, and they need to defend themselves on their northern borders with Lebanon and Syria. It's a lot to do before you try and launch a huge invasion of a place they've not been in since 2014.
OK. Charlie, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, amidst all of this, the Prime Minister is joining Northern European leaders at a summit in Sweden later, where, of course, they will be talking about the conflict in Israel and Gaza.
Yes, the meeting of the UK-led defence grouping had been expected to see leaders focus on the threat from Russia, as the war in Ukraine, of course, heads into another winter.
Well, let's talk to local government editor for Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs, who joins us now. Good to see you, Harry. I tell you what, this strikes to me is the fact that obviously we've got what's going on in the Middle East, and we are sending ships and planes over in a surveillance capacity. We've got troops in training roles around the borders of Ukraine, and at some point heading over that border, we understand. And then we have this joint expeditionary force in the meeting in Sweden, where we're looking, we have other obligations there. It shows how stretched we are.
It absolutely does, yes. I mean, the Joint Expeditionary Force is it's British-led, and it's designed to be a sort of rapid reaction force. And so we've got some of the smaller countries that are combining it, to the Baltic states and the Scandinavians. But absolutely, it would have been clear that the situation in Ukraine would have been top of the agenda a week ago, and now, of course, that's been overtaken by the shocking, barbaric terrorist atrocities by Hamas. I mean, some people suspect that that's not a coincidence, that part of the strategy has been to try to deflect the West, to try to overload our responsibilities. And there is a common factor, of course, isn't there, in terms of Iran, that Iran has been providing military supplies to the Russians and also to Hamas, and so one wonders what's been going on in terms of the calculation of deliberately trying to escalate tensions, to push up the oil price, to overstretch Western support. But having said all of that, I mean, this meeting is obviously sending a signal of resolve, of solidarity, of unity, and I'm sure the message will be going out very strongly that we will be continuing to support the Ukrainians and supporting Israel.
Yes, I mean, as you said, it's incredibly important that we don't forget Ukraine. It's almost beyond belief that here we're going into another winter with Ukraine and now with this terrible situation in the Middle East as well. There's a lot for politicians to try and work out, isn't there?
Yes, and I think one of the problems that is always in this the modern media age is always the public relations aspect of it. That if Ukraine isn't sort of dominating the news agenda, then it slips down, and there's less pressure from public opinion to maintain supplies. It's also, of course, for Israel, as you were discussing with Charlie Peters. I mean, we've got and Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary. We've got Hamas being willing to use civilians as a human shield. They're not. It's not just that they've shown this utter contempt for life of Jews, but even of Palestinians. They're prepared to treat life quite cheap in terms of putting civilians around their sort of terrorist strongholds and their weapon supplies to force a position of civilians being put in harm's way in terms of any action aimed at destroying Hamas's military capability. So all of this being sort of played out in social media, and a lot of effort and importance to win public relations and to win hearts and minds as well as the straightforward military battle.
Look, Harry, we've got to leave it there, but good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. And I have to say, on top of all of that, you've then got the Home Office, which is going to have to look very carefully at tensions across the UK. We've got 2 schools shut down, 2 Jewish schools shut down in London because they're concerned about security. £3 million extra going into this security fund, which protects Jewish communities. We've had that video that we saw this morning of some Muslim ladies pulling down posters of missing Jewish children from walls in London. So the tensions are rising.
Dark times at the moment, doesn't it?
It's all just show a bit of humanity to each other, whatever view you hold, really. We don't want to bring that trouble home. Anyway, that's just me. Come on, we're going to change direction rather rapidly, aren't we? In a couple of minutes.
It's World Egg Day. Yes, World Egg Day. I don't know either, but we'll find out in a couple of moments.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
9:19, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, a staple of the Great British Breakfast, time to celebrate the humble egg, because it's World Egg Day, and that's an excellent way to pay tribute and promote the simple egg.
Less of the simple. Oh, I like a scrambled egg. This year's theme, it's got a theme, eggs for a healthy future, celebrating all the nutritional value that eggs have, as well as their benefits towards global health and farming.
OK, well, let's cross to our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley, who knows more about this. Hello there, Anna.
Good morning. Yes, we're here at Yoke Farm in York, and you might be able to see the hens behind us. There's 500 free-range hens here that produce the egg for many of the meals that go into the restaurant on this site. I'm delighted to be joined by Nathan and Ian this morning. Nathan, you're the general manager here. Just tell me a little bit about here, because it's the world's first egg restaurant, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was first conceived about 7 years ago when the owners, Ben and Emma, decided to quit their jobs, move back into the country, and then set their dream of building the world's first egg restaurant on an egg farm. So yeah, we are in a field with 500 hens, so they obviously produce all of our eggs, which is around 15,000 eggs a month. And it's used to retail in our shop. We use all the eggs in our restaurant for all the dishes, but we also use our eggs for the production for all the bakery.
And what is so brilliant about that powerhouse that is the egg?
Well, we think that the eggs are vitally important for the diet. They've got numerous vitamins and minerals in there, and we believe that there's around 35 million eggs consumed every day in the UK, so very much a part of our diet at Yoke.
definitely. Nation of egg lovers, aren't we? And I'll just bring you in now, Ian. You're the chef here. Tell us about some of the dishes that you make and what you're making, especially today for World Egg Day.
Yeah, so today we've got a special on, which is take on an Eggs Benedict, but we're using a vanilla waffle, some belly pork, a black pudding croquette, and poached eggs and hollandaise. So the egg features 5 times across that dish. On top of that, on our normal menu, we've got a which came first chicken pancake, so a play on the chicken or the egg. The egg features 2 or 3 times on that as well. And our dish called Get Fresh has a sweet corn fritter, which is an egg-based batter with the poached eggs as well.
It is so versatile, isn't it, the egg? You can make so many meals with one.
Yeah, I wasn't aware how versatile they were until I started here, but Ben and I spent a good few months in lockdown developing the menu and learning all about the egg and the versatility of it.
And what would you recommend here? What's like a favourite dish for people?
My favourite dish is the chicken pancakes. Our avo and eggs is very popular, a bit of a brunch classic there as well, and definitely check out the specials board on a weekend.
Fantastic, thank you both so much. I don't know about you, Anne and Stephen, but it's making me feel hungry, all this talk of eggs. There's also a farm shop next door as well, so people can buy local fresh produce and the eggs that these lovely and loud hens are laying here as well.
So come on, Anna, what's your favourite breakfast egg?
My favourite breakfast egg? I'd have to go for the fried, you know. I love it on the big fry up, and you can just dip your toast in if it's a lovely runny yolk, or a nice bacon and egg sandwich as well with a runny yolk. So I'd go for the fried egg as my favourite.
Oh, fair point, fair point. Anna, good to see you. Thank you very much. Get yourself in that restaurant, have something to eat.
Absolutely, yeah.
Love it. I have to say, I do like an egg. A fried egg sandwich is nice.
Where it's runny.
Yeah. Or scrambled. I'm partial to a scrambled egg with soy sauce.
Eggs Benedict is nice.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. Hollandaise on top.
Yeah. Love it. It's nice. I tell you what, although I know some people say, why are you talking about it? It's important, actually, when all hell is breaking loose in parts of the world, that you can sit back and just think about something else for 5 minutes. Because otherwise we'd all go mad.
Wouldn't you? Yeah.
So be thankful for your eggs if you're having an egg this morning. Be grateful that we've got them to eat and that we can eat them in a bit of peace and quiet in this country.
Yeah.
Which is more than you can do elsewhere.
Remember Go to Work on an Egg?
Yes.
There were lots of famous... there were quite a few famous sort of phrases like that. Go to work on an egg, and I can't remember the others.
All that sort of thing. There's a go to school on an egg as well.
Like that, yeah.
Used to always have...
Because it's meant to be very good for you because it's protein.
Yeah,
and it's apparently a very good idea to start the day with a bit of protein.
Yeah.
It's a nice egg.
Brain food, you see. Good for the kids.
Exactly.
Good for the kids. Anyway, it's nice to have a little change of tack amidst all the horror that is going on in the world. But of course, our coverage of what is happening in Israel and in Gaza will continue here on GB News right through the course of the day.
And then we'll be back with you tomorrow morning. Up next, Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Ellie.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Alex Burkill, and here's your latest GB News weather update on this wet and windy Friday. We do have some colder weather to come this weekend, but for the time being, it's a wet and windy picture across the bulk of the UK. Heavy rain across many parts of England and Wales. The highest rainfall totals likely to be building up over the Welsh mountains, but for many, it's a wet picture. And in the south, we could see some heavy, thundery downpours developing as we go through the afternoon. Brighter further north, but blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A chilly feel here, milder towards the south with highs of around 21 or 22 Celsius. Some further heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across the south-southeast, but that rain does clear away as we go through the night. And then we have quite a few places seeing clear skies overnight. Some showers, though, piling down on a cold northerly wind, so particularly around Irish Sea coastal areas and towards the north of Scotland. But with clear skies, many places are going to wake up on Saturday morning to a chilly start. A touch of frost, especially in the north, but then it should be a mostly bright morning. We are going to see showers continuing to pile down on that northerly wind, and they are going to become more widespread as we go into the afternoon. Across Scotland, some of those showers could be wintry over the higher ground, so some sleet or snow possible here. And it's going to be a cold day. Temperatures markedly down compared to where they were last weekend, getting to highs of just 14 or 15 Celsius.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.